Yes, yes, we're live on YouTube, and let's
It's
just
saying not available anymore. Huh.
what's not available?
Hold on, I don't
Oh, we're
know.
live. We're streaming.
We are? Okay, cool.
Yes, custom
Okay.
streaming on YouTube. So,
But
I
wait, did you check yours? Did you check it?
no, well, it says live here. I'll check it, but I just want to welcome everyone to this special Inside Edition, where we'll be reporting on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on the hearings of unidentified aerial phenomena. This is a kind of watch party we're doing. So if you're online, I'm going to share the screen here. Just join us. We're waiting for the house, this to come live. Sometimes they're usually late. We're already over 2 minutes late. It's supposed to start at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we're just waiting for it to come live. Let me just check the YouTube to see if we are live on New Realities, and let me just see. We should be live here. Um, yes, we are live. So let me go back. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you, Zinka, for putting together. I'm Alan
Yes,
Steinfeld
this is a
with
moment in history. It
it
might not be how we want it, but I think people have
might be a
fought
moment.
hard and long to get this to happen.
Yeah,
And this is such a first time in 50 years. you know
exactly.
Public broadcast. Of course, some of the hearing is going to be private after they do the public hearing, but the eyes are on this, and will be on this, because it's a moment. It's
It
definitely a moment.
it is a moment, and that's why we're reporting this today because we want to be there as we capture the latest. But a lot of people are saying there probably won't be much said today. That's also what a lot of people on the inside of the disclosure movement are saying. Well, really, there's not that much really going to be come out because only a few portions of this hearing will be live. The
Yeah.
rest, I mean, in front of the public. The rest of it will be behind closed doors. So,
One of the things I absolutely love about what's happening is that this announcement was on the New York Times. It was on all the papers.
The
So
subcommittee will come to
oh,
order.
there we
Without
go.
objection, the
here we
chair may
go.
declare a recess at any time. Before we get started, I want to recognize a moment of silence for the victims of white supremacist hate crime in Buffalo, New York. The subcommittee has focused intently on that threat in both open and closed hearings. It is utterly devastating to see more victims of this violence. Buffalo, our heart breaks for you.
I went to school in Buffalo. It's
Hmm.
not a very pretty place,
Buffalo's my spirit animal.
With that,
is
I
it?
ask my colleagues to join, pardon me, we will now turn to the business of this hearing.
Okay.
More
Okay.
than 50 years ago, the U.S. government ended Project Blue Book, an effort to
How come we're not
catalog and
seeing
understand
anything?
You
society
share the screen again. You just had it.
I know,
that
but
could not
they're
otherwise be
not.
explained. For more than 20 years, that project
Oh, there.
treated unidentified anomalies in our
There it is.
airspace as a national security threat to be monitored and investigated.
This is Andre
In
Carson.
2017, we learned for the first time that the Department of Defense had quietly restarted a similar organization tracking what we now call unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. Last year, Congress rewrote the charter for that organization, now called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, or AIMSOG for short. Today, we will bring that organization out of the shadows. This hearing and oversight work has a simple idea at its core. Unidentified aerial phenomena are a potential national security threat, and they need to be treated that way. For too long, The stigma associated with UAPs has gotten in the way of good intelligence analysis. Pilots avoided reporting or were laughed at when they did. DoD officials relegated the issue to the back room or swept it under the rug entirely, fearful of a skeptical national security community. Today, we know better. UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real. They need to be investigated, and many threats they pose need to be mitigated. Undersecretary Moultrie, Mr. Bray, thank you for coming today. First, we need you to update us on the status of AIMSOG. The legislation creating it was passed in December. The deadline for implementation is fast approaching, but the group does not even have a named director. We need to know, sir.
Alan, we're still seeing a black screen.
We're staring at a black screen.
Up and running. Secondly, you
why
have
is
to
that?
convince the audience today.
Okay,
And
let me
most
see.
especially
Was it black screen on
military
YouTube?
Yes,
and civilian
we can
Okay,
hear
let me-
it, but just go ahead and do it again.
Let me
full
see if it
screen.
goes on again.
has changed.
How's that? Do you see
There
that?
you go. Yep, we do. Just make it. Yeah,
All right,
perfect.
I'm going to make it
As
bigger then,
witnesses, not as
like
clues.
that.
Thirdly, you need to show us,
How's that? You
Congress,
see good?
and the American
Perfect.
public, whose imaginations you have captured. You are willing to follow the facts where they lead. You know, we fear sometimes that the DoD is focused more on emphasizing what it can explain, not investigating what it can. I'm looking for you to assure us today that all conclusions are on the table. One final note, we are mindful today that AIMSOG is not starting from scratch.
Yes.
This is the third version of this task force in DoD, and civil society groups like the Mutual UFO Network, Mr. Corbell and others have been collecting data on this issue for years. I hope you'll explain how you can leverage the knowledge and experience of our prior work on this matter to move the AIMSOG along. The last time Congress had a hearing on UAPs was half a century ago. I hope that it does not take 50 more years for Congress to hold another, because transparency is desperately needed. I now turn to Ranking Member Crawford for comments he'd like to make.
I wonder if they'll mention
Thank you, Mr.
the
Chairman.
A word,
Honorable Moultrie,
aliens.
Mr. Bray, thank you for coming here today. We
You think
appreciate
so?
it. To begin the open dialogue between Congress and the executive branch
How
on this
far you
important
think we'll
topic.
go here with
While
this?
this topic evokes creative imaginations
can't
of
hear
many,
you.
aside from all the hype and speculation, there are important
All right, let me
underlying
get back
issues
to our
posed
show.
by UAPs. Despite the serious nature of this topic, I have to say I'm more interested in our understanding of Chinese and Russian hypersonic weapon development, or understanding why this administration was so slow to share actionable intelligence with the Ukrainians. However, inasmuch as this topic may help us better understand unknown activities of Russia and China, I am on board. The intelligence community has a serious duty to our taxpayers to prevent potential adversaries such as China and Russia from surprising us with unforeseen new technologies. As overseers of the intelligence community, this committee has an obligation to understand what you are doing to determine whether any UAPs are new technologies or not. And if they are, where are they coming from? In general, the IC spends much of its time and resources trying to understand what we call known unknowns. When it comes to foreign nations' weapons systems and sensors, known unknowns are those features that we don't fully understand yet. The challenge associated with UAP is that they are completely unknown and require a more expansive collection and analysis effort. The intelligence community must balance addressing known threats to our national security with preventing technical surprise. We must continue to follow the facts where they lead us and ensure that there are no technical surprises. The IC must take it seriously when there are credible observations of phenomena that seem to perform in ways that could pose a threat to safe flight operations, or they could be signs of a foreign adversary's attempt to develop a strategic technological surprise against the United States. It's also essential that our pilots and others feel they can report UAPs they observe without any stigma for doing so. This is the open, unclassified portion of our hearing. We'll have a closed, classified part later. It's important for the public to know that the classification of information exists to protect national security, not to try to hide the truth. When we're trying to determine if any UAPs are new technologies being developed by foreign governments, we are inevitably going to run into classified information about what new systems and technologies we do know are in the works here or abroad. But where information
Alan, I just sent you the link
national security, it
You
should
sent-
be
thank
shared
you.
with our allies and the public when
because
feasible.
we're just seeing a black screen. Yeah.
Your assurance
Okay,
to this
thanks
end
for sending
today.
the
It's my
link.
hope that the intelligence
How'd you
community will
send it
continue
on-
to try to determine
on
the nature of
email?
UAPs we've observed
In the chat email, yeah,
Of all
both.
development.
Oh, in
I
the
look forward to
chat,
this hearing
thanks.
and continued dialogue and
Okay.
oversight with the intelligence community on this topic. With that, I yield back.
Good, thanks.
Gentleman yields back, and now we'll turn to our distinguished chairman, Adam Schiff, for any comments he wishes to make.
That the
Thank you,
intelligence
Chairman
community will
Carson,
continue to try to
for
determine
holding
the
this
nature of
open hearing
UAPs
on
we've
unidentified
observed,
aerial
and will
phenomenon
keep Congress
and for
fully
your
apprised
leadership
of
on
all
this
developments.
issue.
I look forward to this
Holding
hearing.
a portion of our discussion today in open session is critical to the cause of transparency and openness, which was Congress's intent in
Let me
authorizing
just
the
close all
Funding
these
Task
windows.
Force.
Comments he wishes to make.
The larger effort that has been undertaken to study and characterize UAP unidentified aerial phenomenon is an important step towards understanding these phenomenon. Holding a portion of our discussion today in open session is critical more to the cause of transparency and openness setting about how DOD and the IC are undertaking that task. UAP reports have been around for decades, and yet we haven't had an orderly way for them to be reported without stigma and to be investigated. That needs to change. UAP reports need to be understood as a national security matter, and that message needs to go out across DOD, the IC, and the whole of the U.S. government. When we spot something we don't understand or can't identify in our airspace, it's the job of those we entrust with our national security to investigate and to report back. That is why it's important that we hold this open hearing for the public to hear directly from the Department of Defense on the steps it's taking to track, analyze, and transparently communicate the work that is being done on this issue. It is also the responsibility of our government and this panel to share as much as we can with the American people, since excessive secrecy only breeds distrust and speculation. I look forward to hearing how the UAP task force is being stood up, what challenges they still face, and how this committee can make sure the task force is able to shed light on one of the world's most enduring mysteries. I thank you gentlemen for your work, and be very interested to hear what you have to say. To me, among the most fascinating questions are these phenomena that we can measure. That is, instruments report there is something there. It is not the human eye confusing objects in the sky. There is something there, measurable by multiple instruments, and yet it seems to move in directions that are inconsistent with what we know of physics or science more broadly. And that to me poses questions of tremendous interest and as well as potential national security significance. So we look forward to hearing what you're able to report to us today in open session, and I want to thank
Will they
Chairman
say the
Carson again
alien
for his
word, Zenka? Will
extraordinary
they?
leadership on this issue, and I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Thank you. With that, we will start our hearing. Under Secretary Moultrie, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you.
This is the
Chairman
government
Schiff,
guy.
Committee Chairman Carson.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Crawford, distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's a privilege to be here with you today to address your questions regarding unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP. I'm pleased to be joined by Mr. Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, who will speak to the Navy's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, which laid the foundation for the efforts we will discuss today. First, I'd like to thank Congress for supporting the department's UAP efforts. The NDAA for fiscal year 2022 has helped us to establish a dedicated office to oversee processes and procedures for the timely collection, processing, analysis, and reporting of UAP-related data. What are UAP? Put simply, UAP are airborne objects that, when encountered, cannot be immediately identified.
That's not
However,
what they are.
it is the department's contention that by combining appropriately structured, collected data with rigorous scientific analysis, any object that we encounter can likely be isolated, characterized, identified, and if necessary, mitigated. We know that our service members have encountered unidentified aerial phenomena. And because UAPs pose potential flight safety and general security risk, we are committed to a focused effort to determine their origins. Our effort will include the thorough examination of adversarial platforms and potential breakthrough technologies, U.S. government or commercial platforms, allied or partner systems, and other natural phenomena.
It's not a natural
We also
phenomenon.
understand that there has been a cultural stigma surrounding UAP. Our goal is to eliminate the stigma by fully incorporating our operators and mission personnel into a standardized data gathering process. We believe that making UAP reporting a mission imperative will be instrumental to the effort's success. The Defense Intelligence and Security Enterprise provides real-time support to our warfighters and mission personnel across all domains. To optimize the department's UAP work, we are establishing an office within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. That office's function is clear: to facilitate the identification of previously unknown or unidentified airborne objects in a methodical, logical, and standardized manner. These goals will ensure that we are working closely with operational personnel on training and reporting requirements, developing data and intelligence requirements, standardizing and integrating processes and procedures for collection, operational surveillance, analysis, and reporting, leveraging our research and development capabilities to improve detection, characterization, and identification of UAPs, developing mitigating solutions and procedures, and identifying strategy and policy solutions. This effort will maximize collaboration and build upon already existing relationships with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the FAA, DHS, and the FBI. We are also committed to strong partnerships with the Department of Energy, NOAA, the DEA, NASA, and the national labs, and just as importantly, our international partners and allies. With regard to the importance of transparency, the department is fully committed to the principle of openness and accountability to the American people. However, we are also mindful of our obligation to protect sensitive sources and methods. Our goal is to strike that delicate balance, one that enables us to maintain the public's trust while preserving those capabilities that are vital to the support of our service personnel. In closing, the department is committed to this effort and welcomes the challenge. We thank you for your committed support and look forward to your questions.
Wow, that was a big nothing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they've already categorized everything, but this is still, I can tell he's excited that he got to say this stuff. I mean, they're excited that this is happening. I can tell.
I don't know. I can't tell that. But yes, maybe.
We have seen an increasing number of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft
Nobody's there.
controlled training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace. Reports of sightings are frequent and continuing.
There you go.
Attribute this increase in reporting to a number of factors, including our work to destigmatize reporting, an increase in the number of new systems such as quadcopters and unmanned aerial systems that are in our airspace, identification of what we can classify as clutter, mylar balloons, and other types of air trash, and improvements in the capabilities of our various sensors to detect things in our airspace.
Wow.
Almost 2 years ago, in August of 2020, Deputy Secretary of Defense Nordquist directed the establishment of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force within the Department of the Navy. The UAP Task Force was built on the foundation of the Navy's initial efforts to respond to the reports from our aviators on unidentified objects observed in our training ranges. The basic issues then and now are twofold. First, incursions in our training ranges by unidentified objects represent serious hazards to safety of flight. In every aspect of naval aviation, safety of our air crews is paramount. Second, intrusions by unknown aircraft or objects pose potential threats to the security of our operations. Our aviators train
What are
as
they,
would
Mr.
fight.
Scott?
So any intrusions that may compromise the security of our operations by revealing our capabilities, our tactics, techniques, or procedures are of great concern to the Navy and the Department of Defense. From the very beginning, we took these reports very seriously. We instituted a data-driven approach to the investigations where we could collect as much data as possible and use all available resources to analyze and make informed decisions on the best ways to address our findings. Our main objective was to transition UAP efforts from an anecdotal or narrative-based approach to a rigorous science and technology engineering-focused study. This data-driven approach requires input from a wide variety of sources. In the early stages, the task force worked to standardize the reporting mechanisms and processes to make it as easy as possible for personnel to report any engagement so that we were getting that wide range of reporting that we needed. We also spent considerable efforts engaging directly with our naval aviators and building relationships to help destigmatize the act of reporting sightings or encounters. And we work with naval aviation leadership to provide additional equipment to record any encounter. Navy and Air Force crews now have step-by-step procedures for reporting on a UAP on their knee board in the cockpit. and
Nice.
in their post-flight debriefings. The direct result of those efforts has been increased reporting, with increased opportunities to focus a number of
Well,
sensors
maybe that's a
on
good
any
thing.
objects.
Increased reporting.
Destigmatization. That's exactly what we need.
No, but there's
And the
no
message
like
has been
intelligence.
received.
What
In
could
fact,
these things
recently,
be?
I
Just
There's no
airborne-
like, let's welcome them if we
Yeah,
did
this
have
is just
people.
airborne
Yeah.
clutter, or I
from
mean,
the flight
how
line,
is airborne
after
clutter a
landing,
national security
to
threat?
talk
If
about,
that's what they call it.
an encounter that he had just experienced.
Oh, let's hear this. Right.
Those were just
Yeah.
the initial steps. We also made a concerted effort to assemble subject matter experts from across the Department of Intelligence community and other U.S. government agencies and departments. We forged partnerships with the research, development, and acquisition communities, with industry partners, and with academic research labs, and we brought many allies and international partners into our discussions on UAP. Additionally, subject matter experts from a wide variety of fields, including physics, optics, metallurgy, meteorology, just to name a few, have been brought in to expand our understanding in areas where we may not have organic expertise.
Where is
In
Lou
short, we've
Elizondo?
endeavored to
He's
bring
the
an
guy who should be
all-hands-on-deck
talking.
approach to better understand this phenomena. So what have we learned so far? Any given observation may be fleeting or longer. It may be recorded or not. It may be observable by one or multiple assets. In short, there's rarely an easy answer. For example, let me share with you the first video that we have here today,
Oh, there we
which
go.
shows an observation in real time.
This is good.
They're saying stuff is getting reported more
This
and
guy
more and
shows
more.
A video, huh?
There it was. That's, in many cases,
Did we see it?
that's
No.
all that a report may include.
They didn't
And in
actually
many
show it to
other
us.
cases, we have far less than this.
Wait, maybe we're delayed. Oh, there
Oh,
it
there
is.
we go.
In both the unclassified and classified versions of the preliminary assessment released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence last June, this often limited amount of high-quality data and reporting hampers our ability to draw firm
I
conclusions.
can't believe
about
that's the
nature
best
or
footage
intent
they
of
have.
UAP.
of
Yeah,
a-
no.
That's-
Including in my
that's
report,
just-
if and when individual UAP incidents are resolved,
That is
they
just
likely fall
embarrassing.
into
They're
one of
showing
five
that
potential
out of a
explanatory
window.
categories: airborne clutter, natural
that is
Yeah, well,
awful.
Dwayne's going to release some 4 different clips that are
There's
or
so much
military
more
grade.
good
or
stuff.
a other that allows for a holding bin of difficult cases.
Oh, did we lose the sound there? Did we
And
lose
for the
him?
possibility of surprise and potential scientific discovery. We stand by those initial results. Since the release of that preliminary report, UAP Task Force database has now grown to contain approximately 400 reports. The stigma has been reduced. We've also made progress in resolving the character of a limited number of UAP encounters. For example, let me show you a couple of another video and image taken years apart in different areas. In this video, U.S. Navy personnel recorded what appears to be triangles, some flashing, recorded several years ago, off the coast of the United States. This was recorded while the U.S. Navy ship observed a number of small unmanned aerial systems in the area. And importantly, the video was taken through night vision goggles with a single lens reflex camera. These remained unresolved for several years.
There you go.
Okay, they're unresolved. Yeah, and I don't know. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
The movement, yeah, is interesting
I mean,
for
the
sure.
shape is very interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what is blurred.
Yeah, that's weird though, right? Okay.
Several years later, and off a different coast, U.S. Navy personnel, again, in a swarm of unmanned aerial systems, and again through night vision goggles and an SLR camera, recorded this image.
Okay, we're gonna.
But this time, other U.S. Navy assets also observed unmanned aerial systems nearby. And we're now reasonably confident that these triangles correlate to unmanned aerial systems in the area. The triangular appearance is a result of light passing through the night vision goggles and then being recorded by an SLR camera. I don't mean to suggest that everything that we observe is identifiable, but
Are they saying there's drones?
but this is a great example of how it takes considerable effort
I don't think so.
to understand what we're seeing in the examples that we are able to collect. In this example, we accumulated sufficient data from 2 similar encounters from 2 different time periods in 2 different geographic areas to help us draw these conclusions. That's not always the case, though. We recognize that that can be unsatisfying or insufficient in the eyes of many.
Yeah.
This is a popular topic in our nation, with various theories as to what these objects may be and where they originate. By nature, we are all curious and we seek to understand the unknown. And
This guy
as
does
a
not
lifelong
seek to
intelligence
stand.
professional, I'm impatient. I want immediate explanations for this as much as anyone else.
I
However,
don't think so.
understanding can take significant time and effort. It's why we've endeavored to concentrate on this data-driven process to derive fact-based results. And given the nature of our business, national defense, we've had to sometimes be less forthcoming.
More people are arriving.
Open forums than
I
many would
think
hope.
this is just
If UAP
embarrassing.
do indeed represent a potential threat to our security, then the capabilities, systems, processes, and sources we use to observe, record, study, or analyze these phenomena need to be classified at appropriate levels. We do not want potential adversaries to know exactly what we're able to see or understand, or how we come to the conclusions we make. Therefore, public disclosures must be carefully considered on a case-by-case basis. So what's next? We're concentrating on a seamless transition to the new organization. And future analysis of complicated issues of UAP issues will greatly benefit from the infrastructure, the process, and the procedures that we've developed to date. I'm confident that the task force under Navy leadership has forged a path forward that will allow us to anchor assessments in science and engineering by anecdotal evidence. We remain committed to that goal, as I know the USDI organization does as well. So thank you very much for your interest and continuing support for the UAP task force. The team's made a lot of progress, but we really are just establishing the foundation for the more detailed analysis that's yet to be done.
This is
your continued support.
This is embarrassing.
We can sustain that momentum necessary to produce.
Yeah, I mean,
understanding of the phenomenon.
I'm always the optimist. I mean, I think that
Right. This is the third version of this task force.
what we can expect from them is
Concerns is
destigmatization and an interest within the government about wanting to know more.
has been sweeping concerns about UAPs under the rug by focusing on events
This guy's not
that can be
satisfied.
explained,
Yeah.
and events that cannot be explained. What can you what can you say to give the American people confidence that you aren't just focusing our attention on low-hanging fruit with easy explanations?
That's a sort of intelligence response there.
Congressman, I'll start.
Yeah.
Mr. Bray.
But these guys are not
feel
going
free
to tell us
to
anything today.
weigh
That's
in.
my feeling.
So the way that we're approaching this is with a more thorough, standardized methodology than what we have in the past. First and foremost, the Secretary of Defense is chartering this effort. This is not someone lower in the Department of Defense. And he has assigned that task to the Office of Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security, that's me, because I'm responsible for looking at intelligence matters, I'm responsible for security matters. This is potentially both. So when you start
I think we have to get over the security threat idea.
Yeah, that's the
safety
biggest,
of our
saddest
It's a
situation.
worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, we should be welcoming
We should be
them.
having
You know what I
a
mean? This is like,
national forum on this.
yeah, philosophical, spiritual. Yeah.
Stand up in office, the AIM-SOG, which I believe the name, sir, will likely change. But we have moved forward in terms of moving to establish that office. We have, as of this week, picked a director for that effort, very established and accomplished individual. We've identified spaces. We've worked with personnel across the Department of Defense, with the services, and we've worked with the IC, which is on board in helping us work through this standardized methodology for now.
Wow.
Bringing in data, analyzing that data, and reporting that data in the appropriate method and appropriate means so we can either get it to our service personnel to ensure their safety, or get it to you and the Congress and to the public to ensure that you have oversight to what we're doing. So chartered by the Secretary of Defense, standardized, and really a methodical approach. It's something we're doing that has not been done before.
I think
Well, if you've got 400 reports and none of them have been a threat, isn't that like that is statistic?
And not only that, there are over
Absolutely.
200,000
So we're open to all
reports
hypotheses.
if you
We're
read
open
the
to
Skinwalker
Exactly.
Pentagon book.
conclusions that,
Exactly.
that we may encounter.
Those are
Quickly, before I pass it to the ranking member and Chairman Schiff, I want to thank you both for taking the time, and I had a good time meeting with you last week, Director Moultrie, Undersecretary
These guys
Moultrie.
are not going to say anything.
It's fair to say that you are a science fiction fan, is that correct?
It's fair to say that I am an inquisitive mind who has spent 40 years in the intelligence field and has focused on both science and science fiction. That is fair.
Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, yeah, look, my generation grew up looking at space sagas and the Apollo program. So all of us who grew up in the 60s were just thrilled by watching our first astronaut land on the moon. That was a momentous occasion to people who were of different generations. Some of them didn't believe that it happened. I still have relatives and friends who don't believe it happened, right?
come
Science
on.
fiction to them.
But
to us, it was, no, that's the progress that we've made. And so I was enthralled by that, and I've taken that to heart. I enjoy the challenge of what may be out there. I have mentioned to you that, yes, I have followed science fiction. I have gone to conventions, even, I'll say it on the record. Got to break the ice somehow. But, you know, I have done that, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. Don't necessarily dress up, but I do, you know, I do believe that it's important to show that the Department of Defense has, you know, we have character, and we're people just like you, just like the American people. We have our inquisitiveness. We have our questions. We want to know what's out there as much as you want to know what's out there. We get the questions not just from you, we get it from family members. And we get them night and day, not just in committee hearings. So finding what's out there is important, but first and foremost, it's important for us to do that so that we can ensure that our people, our personnel, our aviators, our bases and installations are safe. And then that curiosity factor is something else that we just want to know, because that's the human race. It's just, you know, that insatiable desire to know.
Wow.
Thank you, sir. Ranking
That
Member
was a
Crawford.
big nothing, wasn't it?
Mr. Moultrie, you said you don't
Well,
necessarily dress
he's
up.
admitting that he goes to these conferences and he's
That
curious.
wasn't a
I mean, I think
real
that we can't
strong
expect them to get out of their straight suits. I mean, yeah, this is depressing,
Oh,
but
wait.
with
And thank you, Mr. Moultrie, for
they
breaking the ice.
finishing
We did
this?
appreciate that. The inability to understand objects in our sensitive operating areas is tantamount to an intelligence failure that we certainly want to avoid. This is not about finding alien spacecraft, but about delivering dominant intelligence across the tactical, operational, and strategic spectrum. So my question is, how can AIM-SOG lead to prevention of intelligence surprises?
By telling us the truth. That's how
Sure,
they
I'll
can
start.
prevent it.
The goal of our
yeah.
effort is to integrate it into what we already do on a normal basis, which is look for the unknowns, Congressman, as you stated in your opening remarks, across all domains. So we've been doing this for decades. We've been looking
There
at
you go.
space domain, looking at space objects, looking at space weather, looking at space phenomenon. We've been looking at things in the air domain, and we, as you know, we, and I'll talk more about this in classified session, but we have a very concerted effort to understand adversarial platforms and adversarial developmental programs. And we do that also in the ground domain. And of course, we're very interested in what happens in the underwater or sea domain, if you will, subsurface domain. So if there are objects that our aviators or air crews are encountering in this air domain, and their sensors are discovering or detecting some of these objects, we want to just bring that in to the normal process that we have for identifying unknown unknowns. We want to make sure we have the intelligence requirements that allow us not only to look at that event from the time that it occurs forward, but maybe retrospectively, we want to go back and see if we can get to the left of that event to say, was there some developmental program that we, to get to your technical surprise issue, sir, that we should have known about? And if so, how do we put that intelligence requirement in place to ensure that we are following an adversarial development or any other development that may be out there?
See,
So that's what
this
we
is
wanna
a
do in
worldwide
terms of normalizing
phenomena,
this and bringing it into the normal
and
process of how we identify unknown unknowns.
It's
So you
just
mentioned
ridiculous to
fidelity,
say
and I
that
think it's
is a
important
threat to our
talk about the
airspace when it's
relationship
everywhere.
from the Navy as the lead
Yeah.
agency on this. How do you interact with Space Force, Air Force to create that
That's a good
degree of
question.
fidelity? We're talking about sensors and so on. And I guess where I have some concerns that many of the images that we see commonly in this
Sorry,
committee and
that's not
even
in
in open
sync.
source, the resolution and the clarity that would allow a robust technical intelligence analysis is challenging. So is AIMSOC prepared to address the quality and quantity of data collected on UAP to advance intelligence collection? And do you have the adequate sensors you need to collect that high quality data?
One of the lines of effort that we have is looking at our sensor capabilities and to understand whether or not, as the video showed that Mr. Bray displayed, sometimes it's very fleeting data that we have on some of these objects. And we want to make sure that, one, our systems are calibrated to actually be able to collect on the objects. You know, our sensors today they're calibrated for specific things. We want to make sure they're calibrated for things of this nature, things of this size, things of this velocity, if I can use that term. We want to make sure that once we have that data is stored in some standardized method that we can then extract and that we can feed into our system real time. So we do not want this to take some prolonged period of time for us to get that data. But our goal is absolutely to have that high fidelity information that we get from all sensors, and we want to be able to integrate that with what we may have off of ground-based sensors. So whatever we may have on a platform, whatever we may have on the ground, whatever we may have from other sensors that we may have in different domains, we want to be able to integrate that all and get this integrated picture as we would, as I said, with any other unidentified objects or things that we are tracking as a part of our normal intelligence responsibilities.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Bray, if you would. I'm a Navy pilot. I've encountered a UAP. Walk me through the reporting protocol once I see something that I think needs reported.
The first thing that aviator would do after landing as a part of their normal debriefing is they would contact their intelligence officer. Their intelligence officer would then walk them through first filing a data preservation to ensure that that whatever sensor data may be on the aircraft, that we preserve that so that it's available for later analysis. Second, they would actually fill out a form that includes details like where they were operating, altitudes they were operating, speeds, what they observed, whatever sensor data they may have recorded from that. And then that report is filed. It goes two places. One, it goes through the operational chain of command, so that operational units are aware of what's being observed, and also to the UAP task force, so that they can take that data, database it, and quite often have individuals from the task force contact the aviator and ask them additional questions if there were things that weren't clear in the report. That then goes into a database where we begin to compare it with other observations that we have. Again, comparing for locations, comparing for altitude, speeds, shapes, if any RF emissions were detected from the platform, all of that, so that we can try to reach some conclusions on that.
Thank you. Yield back.
Wow.
Gentleman yields back. Chairman Schiff.
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Bray, can you rerun that first image that looked like it was outside of a plane window? And if you wouldn't mind going up to the screen and tell us what we're seeing. Not that you can necessarily tell us what we're seeing, but explain what we should be looking at in that first image.
Absolutely. And Alexi, what I'll ask is if you can stop it at a certain point.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, they're seeing a light in the sky. So I'm sorry it's not synced up, this YouTube and the sound, but okay, here we go. Wow, this is awfully embarrassing. That's all they can show. Can you believe that? That looks like a reflection on the glass.
And are we looking outside of a civilian aircraft window? Is that what we're looking at?
Is that the best they can find? You know, they have thousands of hours of footage at the Pentagon as classified from all those F-16s following UFOs, UAPs. This is a public embarrassment by the government to show us that and say, oh yeah, this is what people are seeing. It's like, really? Is that what they're saying? I don't think so. We should get John Martin on the show. Do you know John Martin? Oh. Okay. Yeah, they're seeing a little chemtrail in the sky. That's what they're seeing there. I don't know why we're not hearing the Senate now. Who's ever talking is not on camera.
Is that it right there? Can you point to the screen again, what we're supposed to be looking at?
This. Oh my God! Can you believe that? Zenka, you're muted, Zenka.
Yeah, this is embarrassing.
That's what they're saying has been all over this little reflection of light. I mean,
pathetic.
Really? Is that the best that the government can show? That's an insult. It's insult to the people who've seen these things. Why don't they at least show
to the archives that they have?
The Nimitz. Why don't they at least show the Nimitz footage? At least that.
Okay, if you could stop that frame. That's not the one.
My God. I think Schiff is onto something. Oh yeah, there. That's what he was looking at. That little reflection of light in the window. I mean, I do have to say, on the series that me and Deborah are doing, makingcontactseries.com, we're going to go really into detail of what's out there.
Yeah.
And it won't be these little...
Object right here, it zooms by the window, right in this area right there. There we go.
I don't see anything
See
zooming
that part
by.
right there again, going by? I think we're having a hard time stopping it in the right spot.
Oh my God. This is awful.
Okay.
So as you can see, it's difficult, and I think a part of the issue here is the laptop we're working with is not as easy for stopping that video in the right spot.
We'll describe what we have seen in that. What are we observing?
What you see here is aircraft that is operating in a U.S. Navy training range that has observed spherical object in that area, and as they fly by it, they take a video. You see it looks reflective in this video, somewhat reflective, and it quickly passes by the cockpit of the aircraft.
And is this one of the phenomena that we can't explain?
I do not have an explanation for what this
They don't even know what they grabbed.
object is.
And is this one of the situations where it is, that's the object that we're looking at right there? Thank you. And is this a situation where it was observed by the pilot and it was also recorded by the aircraft's instruments?
We'll talk about the multi-sensor part in a later session.
That means private session.
Yeah.
But in this case, we have at least that.
This is another huge cover-up.
Director of National Intelligence 2021 unclassified report. The ODNI reported 144 UAPs between 2004 and 2021.
Yeah.
80% of which were recorded on multiple instruments. And I take it with respect to some of those, you had a pilot seeing them if it was observed by a pilot, right, and you had multiple instruments recording it. So you really have three sensors, the human sensor and two technical sensors detecting the object, is that?
For the majority of incidents that we had in the last year's report, the majority had multi-sensor data. When I talk about the 400 reports that we have now, that number will certainly go down because a lot of those new reports that we have are actually historic reports that are narrative-based. So that percentage will go down just as a factor of the fact that the destigmatization has resulted in more narrative reports.
And that's the object we're looking at right there now, right?
That's it right there.
Okay.
All right.
Deborah joined us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But we're going to go, now they're going to show the object.
Last year's report also said that of those 144, 18 of them reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics.
Oh, there's the
appear to
object.
demonstrate advanced technology. And some of them appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion.
There you go.
That's pretty intriguing.
Some intelligence there.
And if you're able to answer this in this setting, are we aware of any foreign adversary capable of moving objects without any discernible means of propulsion?
This wasn't in the speeches.
I think I would, without discernible means of propulsion, I would say that we're not aware of any adversary that can move an object without discernible means of propulsion.
There we go.
Question then becomes, in many of these cases where we don't have a discernible mean of propulsion in the data that we have, in some cases, there is likely sensor artifacts that may be hiding some of that. There's certainly some degree of something that looks like signature management that we have seen from some of these UAP, but I would caution. I would simply say that there are a number of events in which we do not have an explanation, in which, and there are a small handful in which there are flight characteristics or signature management that we can't explain with the data that we have. We'll continue. Those are obviously the ones that are of most interest to us. Earlier, when we asked about how you avoid technological surprise, the biggest way you avoid technological surprise is by collecting this type of data and by, importantly, calibrating the assumptions that you go into with how you do that analysis. I'll tell you, within the UAP task force, we have one basic assumption, and that is that generally speaking, our sensors operate as designed. And we make that assumption because many times these are multi-sensor
Maybe
collections.
Schiff will ask
We
the
make no
question.
assumptions about the origin of this or that there may or may not be some sort of technology that we don't understand. That's, I think, the key to avoiding technological surprises by calibrating those assumptions.
And finally, with respect to the second two videos showing the small triangles, the hypothesis is that those are commercial drones that, because of the use of night vision goggles, appear like triangles. Is that the operating assessment?
Some type of drone, some type of unmanned aerial system, and it is simply that light source resolves itself through the night vision goggles onto the SLR camera as a triangle.
And have we, in order to prove that hypothesis, flown a drone and observed it with that same technology to see whether we can reproduce the effect?
The UAP task force is aware of studies that have done that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
And what about the movement? I mean, the movement was unusual, right? Or was that the camera?
The duplications of drones with night vision goggles. Why don't we look at those?
My first question is, through this process where there's been sightings, have the sightings been stationary or have they always been sighted from a moving object? From a plane or a ship that may be moving?
Good question there.
Have these reports ever come from a stationary object being observed in the sky?
The UAP task force does have reports from stationary, reports from a stationary observer.
There's a difference observing something when you're moving as well. It's physics, right? So that's why I asked that question. Are we capable or have we made any breakthroughs or anyone made any breakthroughs to be able to cite something and make some determination at all of its composition, whether it's a solid or a gas? Is there any such capability?
From
not asking what, I'm just
right from some of the returns. I mean, it's clear that that the majority, well, it's clear that many of the observations we have are physical objects from the sensor data that we have.
Well, gas is physical, is a physical object. It can be, and so, and you see where I'm going with this. I'm trying to determine what it is we're looking at. So if we can decide if something is a solid or a gas, and if there have been any conclusion on its capabilities, like its capabilities of movement, of turning, going, 180 degrees or 90-degree turn, anything along that line that we've been able to determine.
Within the, and again, I should point out that, you know, that there is not a single explanation for UAP. There are a lot of different things that.
Well, they haven't given us one explanation.
Basically, we really don't know much on that. That's all I'm trying to get at. We believe that you have protocol right now for our military, but are there any non-military reports coming forward of similar events, or is it all coming from military?
The UAP task force has a very good working relationship with the FAA. They have very good working relationship with other parts of the U.S. government so that we can ingest reports from.
Do we have any reports non-military?
Yes.
Thank you. That's my question. And do we need to put out protocol for civilians that may be in that?
Yes.
Good question.
That would be appropriate and helpful.
I think standardized reporting, without a doubt, is key to helping us get to ascertain what some of these are.
I think it would be
Opening your minds.
Do we? There are other people
That's
besides
great.
the U.S. that have had these
This
experiences.
is a good question. Outside the U.S.
Is that correct?
There are. That's correct.
Is it all of our allies, or is it allies and adversaries? What have we learned publicly?
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Oh, come
Well,
on.
that goes to my next question. Publicly, have others made anything which would not have to be considered closed? I don't want you to answer what they've said necessarily.
Allies have seen these. China has established its own version of a UAP task force. So clearly, a number of countries have observations of things in the airspace that they can't identify.
And do we share data with some, with all? Are they sharing with us?
We share data with some, and some share data with us.
But not necessarily all that have publicly reported something?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that's an important thing, and for the other session, actually, that we don't discuss that now. Because, you know, obviously something like this can be a national security challenge for us, no doubt about it. By an adversary.
That is such an awful concept. If it's in other countries, who is the threat
can be
here?
very disruptive to our military actions, or at least serve as a distraction. So my caution would be careful who we share our data with, and don't necessarily trust some of the data we may get from someone else. And with that, I yield back.
There's like, this is so frustrating. Very frustrating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the objectives of this open hearing is to try to erode some of the stigma that attaches to, in particular, our military men and women reporting this. It's obviously really very serious because should one of our adversaries have developed a technology that we don't know about it, we need to know about it yesterday. And obviously, any sort of stigma that prevents our military from reporting this data as comprehensively as possible is a national security threat. So I really just have two questions in the service of that goal. The first is, the chairman asked that we run that video again. Most people, when they see a video, we're all used to seeing things from a car, seeing things from a sidewalk. Very few people have the experience of observing something through night vision goggles at Mach 1.5. So just talk for a minute about, if you would, whichever of you is most appropriate, how radically different observation is at high speed and 3-dimension than it is for most of us who walk around and drive cars.
So the first thing I think that's important to note about this is there are lots of things when you are moving very fast and an object is between you and a stationary reference point like the ground, it gives a lot of different impressions about how quickly something is or isn't moving. And it actually means that it is a challenge, especially with narrative-based data, to get a lot of information on that. That's why the sensor data is so important, because things do happen very quickly, as you see there. And sometimes things that happen very quickly, something may be moving very slow. That aircraft is moving quite fast. How fast that object is moving that goes by is probably very slow.
So I guess my point is that an observation, either a visual observation or a electronic observation, infrared or whatever, looks radically different than it does to most people. even instruments. Instruments are on gimbals and that sort of thing, so that creates a very unusual view to, again, those of us who are used to seeing things in 2 dimensions largely. And second question, I think, Mr. Bray, you said something that I want to unpack a little bit. A number of these UAPs, you said, we can't explain. Again, in the service of sort of reducing speculation and conspiracy theories, we can't explain can range from a visual observation that was distant on a foggy night, we don't know what it is, to we've found an organic material that we can't identify, right? Those are radically different worlds. So when you say we can't explain, give the public a little bit better sense of where on that spectrum of we can't explain we are. Are we holding materials, organic or inorganic, that we don't know about? Are we, picking up emanations that are something other than light?
Are we seeing
that could be
life
deemed to be
forms,
communications? Give us
other
a sense for
beings?
what you mean when you say we can't explain.
Sure. When I say we can't explain, I mean exactly as you described there, that there is a lot of information, like the video that we showed, in which there's simply too little data to create a reasonable explanation. There are a small handful of cases in which we have more data that our analysis simply hasn't been able to fully pull together a picture of what happened. And those are the cases where we talk about where we see some indications of flight characteristics or signature management that are not what we had expected. When it comes to material that we have no material. We have detected no emanations within the UAP task force that would suggest it's anything non-terrestrial in origin. So there's when I say unexplained, I mean everything from too little data to the data that we have doesn't point us towards an explanation.
Why does
but
it
we'll
say
go
it's
wherever the data takes us.
non-terrestrial?
Again, we've made no assumptions about what this
Saying
is.
the physical
We're committed to
objects that
understanding
they've.
these, so
But how could they
we'll go
say
wherever
it's
that data takes us.
non-terrestrial?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no,
That's
there's
very
no
helpful. And so
scientific
I think it
basis for
bears
saying this
emphasis.
is
When
non-terrestrial.
you say we can't explain, everything that you can't explain is in a bucket called data. Is that correct? And that would mean data collected by sensors, visual observations, everything that we can't explain, quote unquote, is in a bucket called data.
Right. A narrative report from the early 2000s, if it just had a little bit of information on it, would be in our database and it would be unresolved.
I would add to that, it's insufficient data. I mean, that's one of the challenges we have. Insufficient data either on the event itself, the object itself, or insufficient data or plug-in with some other organization or agency that may have had something in that space at that time. So it's a data issue that we're facing in many of these instances, Congressman.
Understood. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Wow.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Gallagher.
Another awful attempt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to join this hearing. I really appreciate the witness's testimony. Mr. Moultrie, as the chairman mentioned, DoD had an initiative to study UFOs in the 1960s called Project Blue Book. It's also been well reported in our briefing.
There we go.
And other places that we have more recent projects, specifically ATIP. Could you describe any other initiatives that the DoD or DoD contractors have managed after Project Blue Book ended and prior to ATIP beginning?
Yeah.
Anything also predate Project Blue Book?
So I can't speak to what may have predated Project Blue Book. I mean, of course, there's Roswell and all these other things that people have talked about over the years.
Thank you.
I'm familiar
Yes.
with ATIP. I haven't seen other documented studies that have been done by DoD in that regard.
So you're not aware of anything in between Project Blue Book and ATIP?
Not aware of anything that's official that was done in between those two. Okay. Hasn't been brought to my attention.
Okay. Additionally, are you aware of any other DoD or DoD contract programs focused on UAPs from a technological engineering perspective? And by that, I mean, are you aware of any technology initiatives focused on this topic other than initiatives focused on the individual case investigations?
I'm not aware of any contractual programs that are focused on anything related to this other than what we are doing in the Navy Task Force and what we are about to launch in terms of our effort.
Same question for you, Mr. Bray.
Same answer, not aware of anything outside what we are doing in the UAP task force.
So just to confirm, you're not aware of any technology or engineering resources that have been focused on these efforts besides what
Once again, I'll say no contractual.
This guy is going somewhere with it, though.
It's perfect because we know we're spending a ton of money on this,
The reason why
but
I-
nobody's talking to each other.
Qualify it that way. Yeah, let me qualify it that way. I can't speak to what people may be looking at in the department. Somebody says, I'm looking at something that may be unidentified, and I can't speak to that. I speak to official programs that we have on the record.
It's also
On
been
the
reported,
record.
that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just
Here we
ranges,
go.
but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable at the same time. The
Robert
red
Saleh.
orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy.
This is a
of
good
that.
question.
Perfect.
Brave, you've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Why not?
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
So you've just seen informal stories, no official assessment that you've done or exists within DoD that you're aware of regarding the Malmstrom incident?
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance of the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
Why not?
Man.
High-profile incident. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that are out there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our attention.
So how would it have to be officially brought to your
Usually
attention?
it's
I'm bringing it to your attention.
Sure, so-
This is pretty official.
Sure. So we'll go back and take
Yeah.
a look at it, but generally there is some
Call Robert
authoritative
Saleh.
figure that says there is an incident that occurred. We'd like you to look at this. But in terms of just tracking what may be in the media that says that something occurred at this time, at this place, there are probably a lot of leads that we would have to follow up on. I don't think we
No
would.
way.
one lead.
Can't believe he's saying this is major.
For what it's worth, I would like you to look into it. And
Sure.
if for no other reason, you could dismiss it and say this is not worth wasting resources on.
Will do.
And then finally, are you aware of a document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Notes Memo?
That's good.
I am
Admiral
not.
Wilson.
I'm not personally aware of that.
Okay.
Wow, these
This is a
guys.
document in which, again, I'm not commenting on the veracity. I was hoping you would help me with that, in which a former head of DIA claims to have had a conversation with the Dr. Eric Wilson and claims to have sort of been made aware of certain contractors or DoD programs that he tried to get fuller access to and was denied access to. So you're not aware of that.
The Wilson
aware of
document's important.
In my 10 seconds remaining, then I guess I just would ask Mr. Chairman unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
Great.
Without objection.
This guy's
Thank you, Mr.
onto
Chairman.
something.
Appreciate it.
Gallagher
Yeah, we need to thank him publicly.
got the closest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of you for appearing today and for your public service. First question is, there have been no collisions between any U.S. assets in one of these UAPs, correct?
We have not had a collision. We've had at least 11 near misses, though.
And maybe we'll talk about those 11 near misses or any place where there's close proximity. I assume, or tell me if I'm wrong, there's been no there's no communications or any kind of communication signals that emanate from those objects that we've detected, correct?
That's correct.
And have we attempted to communicate with those objects?
No.
So we don't even put out a alert saying, U.S. Identify yourself. You are, within our flight path or something like that. We haven't said anything like that.
We've not put anything out like that. Generally speaking, for example, in the video that we showed earlier, it appears to be something that is, unmanned, appears to be something that may or may not be in controlled flight, and so we've not attempted any communication with that.
What?
Okay, so
That doesn't make sense.
And I assume we've never discharged any armaments against a UAP, correct?
Well,
That's correct.
that's not correct.
How about wreckage? have we come across any wreckage of any kind of object that has now been examined by you?
The UAP task force doesn't have any wreckage that isn't explainable, that isn't consistent with being of terrestrial origin.
Do we have any sensors underwater to detect on submerged UAPs? Anything that is in the ocean or in the seas?
So I think that would be more appropriately addressed in closed session, sir.
Okay.
Well, that's
I think one of the biggest questions that I have is, we say with a lot of probability, we say they, quote unquote, probably do represent physical objects, close quote. When we say probably, is that because we cannot conclusively say that they are physical objects?
In the task force report, when I say probably represent physical objects, most of them represent physical objects. There could be some that are more of a meteorological phenomena, something like that, that may not be a physical object in the sense that most people think of something you could go up and touch.
But the ones where you say most of them represent physical objects, can you say that they are definitely, like with 100% certainty, that they are physical objects?
I can say with certainty that a number of these are physical objects.
Okay, so we can't rule out that some of them may not be physical objects.
So, some certainly could be a sensor anomaly or something like that. Some could be.
Now, how about with regard to UAPs? We've talked about UAPs on training areas, but obviously there's some sensor bias. I would think we put sensors in training areas. How about with regard to non-training areas? Do we track what's in open source and what civilians and others have tracked? And have we found similarities to what they've observed in terms of UAPs in non-training areas to the ones that are in training areas?
The UAP task force has worked very hard to make sure the data set that we're working with is a data set that we have very good control over that data. So we have some partnerships with FAA so that we get some of that, so we get that reporting in. But if it comes to just open source reports or someone says that they saw something, that generally does not make it into our database.
So basically, it sounds like we have a good partnership with FAA. But apart from FAA, we don't have partnerships with other agencies or other entities that might be tracking so that we could enlarge our data set to make comparisons.
So we will. So that's the goal of this next effort, will be to expand that relationship with the rest of government and the interagency, so we can understand what they're seeing, what we're seeing. We can correlate on each other's holdings.
Because
and
I think,
resolve this.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think that we might have a bias right now going on with regard to just reporting on UAPs being in training areas when we don't really track what's happening elsewhere. Last question, have our encounters with UAPs altered the development of either our offensive or defensive capabilities, or even our sensor capabilities?
We'd save that for the closed session.
Wow.
Okay, great, thank you.
That guy was close to something.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, and want to thank the witnesses for being here today.
Oh my God, is that it?
Should we invite John Ramirez up on the Zoom?
Has attracted a lot of interest in
Okay.
people that are
Definitely. John Ramirez.
curious about.
Yeah, I've been texting.
Good,
as
good,
we talk
good,
about,
definitely.
and I would say there's a lot of what I would call amateur interest groups that are involved in the UAP field. My question is, when there are unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there, what are the consequences for people that are involved with that or groups that are involved with that?
So one of the concerns that we have is that there are a lot of individuals and groups that are putting information out there that could be considered to be somewhat self-serving.
Like Congress.
We're trying to do what's in the best interest of, one, the defense, and two, what's in the best interest of the public, to ensure that we can put factual-based information back into the mainstream.
They've given us no facts today.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Media that we have, so people understand what's there. It's important because we are attempting, as this hearing has drawn out, to understand, one, what may just be natural phenomenon, two, what may be sensor phenomenology or things that were happening with sensors, three, what may be legitimate counterintelligence threats to
four,
places that
missing
we
one
have,
category
or bases
there.
or installations, or security threats to our platforms. And anything that diverts us off of what we have with the resources that have been allocated to us, send us off in these spurious chases and hunts that are just not helpful. And they also help, they also contribute to the undermining of the confidence that the Congress and the American people have that we are trying to get to the root cause of what's happening here, report on that, and then feed that back into our national security apparatus so we are able to protect the American people and our allies. So it is harmful, it is hurtful, but hopefully if we get more information out there, we'll start to lessen the impact of some of those spurious reports.
So just taking that a step further, so that misinformation, false narratives, manufactured, so what are the consequences? Are there legal consequences? Are there examples that you can give us where people have been held accountable by this misinformation or disinformation?
I can't give you, any examples where somebody's been legally held liable for putting something out there, but...
Well, I guess what's the deterrent from people engaging in this activity?
I don't know. I don't have that answer. That's something that, welcome the dialogue with Congress to talk about that with the members who, help legislate those laws to say what should be the legal ramifications that we could use to potentially hold individuals accountable, whether it be citizens
accountable
or
for saying they've seen something that's
into,
not in their data banks?
By other forces or other countries, if you will.
And in terms of DOD's and review and analysis in this field, I mean, is there a standard in place when it comes to UAPs? I mean, is there any guidance you look to that's codified in law or otherwise within DOD that kind of sets out the standards for UAPs and what to look for?
I think that's part of what the group that we're standing up now will be chartered to do. We're actually, from my organization, we'll be looking at policy and standards that we have
John. Thanks for joining us, John.
Excellent.
We want to hear your ideas after this is over.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Welch.
Thank you. I'm going to follow on the line of questions from Mr. LaHood. Gentlemen, what seems incredibly difficult for you is that there's two almost competing but different narratives. One is no one knows whether there's extraterrestrial life. It's a big universe, and it would be pretty presumptuous to have a hard and fast conclusion. And then if there is, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there is some exploration coming here. And that underlies a lot of the reports you get. I think Mr. LaHood was asking about that. People think there must be extraterrestrial life, and it's not at all beyond the pale that there would be a visit here. On the other hand, as the DOD, you have the responsibility to make sure that our national security is protected, and that if there are surveillance drones or active drones that can disable our systems, that has to be analyzed, has to be stopped. So how do you divide how do you separate your responsibilities where you get all these reports from folks who maybe in good faith, maybe not, believe that you should be investigating every possible report of a extraterrestrial incident? I'll start with you, Mr. Moultrie.
Sure, indeed, Congressman, and thank you for the question. It's important that we, as a part of this effort, really build out the relationship that we have with others, including NASA, and for the reasons that you just pointed out. So there are elements in our government that are engaged in looking for life in other places, and they have been doing that for decades. Right? They've been searching for extraterrestrial life. There are astrobiologists who have been doing this too. We're a part of that same government, and so our goal is not to potentially cover up something if we were to find something. It's to understand what may be out there, examine what it may mean for us, if there are any, from a defense perspective, any national security implications or ramifications, but then to work with organizations as appropriate, if it's a weather phenomenology with NOAA, if it's a potential for extraterrestrial life or an indication of extraterrestrial life, with someone like NASA.
So the transparency actually is very important.
Completely.
For public consumption.
Completely.
But we're going to have a classified briefing, and without going into the details of what kinds of secrets that we can't share here, what is it? What are we protecting? I don't know if you can answer this question in this open forum, but in fact, your perception of what it is we have to, quote, protect.
So I think right now what's really important for us to protect is how we know certain things. So there are a lot of things that we know, whether it be about the thinking of other leaders around the world, the weapon systems that are being developed, or how we detect things that may be threats to us. Many of those things are the result of some of our most sensitive sources and methods, and we'll use those things not just for this effort, but those same sources and methods are used to help protect us from adversaries and from others who might mean to do us harm. There aren't separate UAP sensors. There's not a separate UAP processing computer. There's not a separate UAP dissemination chain or whatever. So it's the same process. It's the same system that we have that helps us do all that. We need to protect that because this is something that that we're looking at, but we're sure there are going to be other things that we'll look at in the future that will need those same sensors, we'll need those same sources and methods to help us do. So we're protecting the fact of that this nation has developed capabilities that enable us to know what may be threats to us and to counter those threats before they become something of a national issue.
Thank you very much. I want to thank
I
both,
don't get the
you, Mr.
threat.
Brady,
What
and
is the
Mr.
threat?
Today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlemen, beyond videos, is there a range of other information that the executive branch has that would be valuable to the American people while protecting sources and methods, obviously? The details of individual encounters, including the time, place, and details of an encounter. And does the AIMSOG have a clear and repeatable process for considering public release as part of the process?
Chairman Carson,
and do you commit to building that process if it's not in place?
The UAP task force, the security classification guide that the UAP task force has been operating under that I approved really was meant to protect those sources and methods and meant to protect any knowledge that an adversary intelligence entity may gain from understanding what we're tracking, how we track it, or when we're tracking it, or if we're not. And so that has been an important piece in the balance between transparency and preserving our warfighting advantage, because the U.S. military does train as it would fight. What I will commit to is, at least for that material that's under my authority as the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, for information that we have when it does not involve sources and methods, and when we can, with a reasonable degree of confidence, determine that it does not pose a foreign intelligence or national security threat, and it's within my authority to do so, I commit to declassifying that. So I believe very much in the transparency of this, and we work very hard to balance that with our national security needs.
And I'll just add, Congressman, just over the last 3-4 months, I think that the intelligence community and the national defense apparatus have disclosed more information on various events than it has in probably the previous 10 years. You have our commitment to work closely with the Director of National Intelligence and others in the declassification and downgrading of intel apparatus to ensure that we can get whatever information that we can out to the American people and to the public writ large.
Greatly appreciated, sir. Ranking Member Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stefanik is en route, I believe, just real quickly, but in the interim, if you'll indulge me, I just have a couple of real small questions. One is, do we have an example? Can you cite a specific example of an object that can't be explained as having been human-made or natural?
That's a good question.
I mean, the example that that I would say that that is still unresolved, that I think everyone understands quite well, is the 2004 incident from Nimitz. We have data on that, and it simply remains unresolved. Does not mean it resolves to being something, right, that is easily explainable or well, obviously it resolves to being something that is difficult to explain. But I can't point to something that definitively was not man-made, but I can point to a number of examples in which remain unresolved.
Gotcha. With regard to videos that have appeared in open source channels, for example, the Tic Tac video, does AIMSOG maintain control of videos, and how do you prevent leaks of potentially classified videos or other material?
So the AIMSOG, as we establish that organization, we will have a process for classified and compartmented holdings, and we will find a way of getting positive control over those. We have our sensitive access programs and special access programs that allow us to put what we call SAPs around things, and then there's controlled access programs that allow us to put caps around things. So we'll have that in place. Our goal will be ensuring that we're sharing that with the appropriate analysts and the appropriate exploiters, if you will, who can look at that data too. What we don't want to do is bring something into a DoD database or a DoD holding and then have so many wrappers around it, it's not available to those who really need to look at it and to exploit it. And that's one of the reasons we're establishing relationships with the interagency, with the IC and others to be able to do that, sir. But we will do our best to maintain positive control over the materials that we have within our holdings.
Thank you.
Chairman Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the 2021 report, you know, under the category of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology, those 18 incidents in which some of the UAP appear to remain stationary, winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. It goes on to say, in a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. I couldn't tell from that whether that small number of cases was a part of the subset of 18. That is, among the 18 which appeared to move with unusual pattern or flight characteristics, did some of those also emit radio frequency energy?
I would have to check with our UAP task force on that. I believe, without getting into specifics that we can do in the closed session, at least some that we have detected RF emissions from were not behaving oddly otherwise.
And the significance of measuring that radio frequency energy is what? That we suspect that this was some form of aircraft in which there were radio transmissions?
The biggest thing that you're looking for there is any indication of an effort to jam whatever sensors that we may have looking at it.
But I would also add to that radio frequency, as you know, Congressman, is used to control various platforms too. So the fact of emanations coming off of any platform, whether it be a UAV or another platform, could be radio frequency activity related to that entity transmitting out or something transmitting to that platform. And of course, we have a sensitivity with our airborne platforms of picking it up, which is one of the reasons that we try to prevent people from using their cell phones on airplanes and things like that. It's very sensitive to RF emanations. So that's a part of what we'll be looking at in the AIMSOG. What is this? Is this something that we can collect on, and can we start to characterize the signaling environment around the emanations that may be coming off of some of these UAPs?
So that energy then that was recorded could be either an effort to jam, or it could be an effort to control a UAV, or any other communication with that craft.
I would say that's accurate.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
That's not satisfying.
As the ODNI report makes clear, one possible explanation for UAPs is that we are detecting U.S. aircraft, either secret air programs or even test prototypes. I won't ask you in this setting, obviously, to describe any secret DoD programs. That said, I do want to make sure the U.S. government isn't chasing its own tail. Firstly, do you have a clear and repeatable process to check with compartmented programs about whether a UAP sighting is attributable to a U.S. aircraft? Secondly, does the AIMSOG staff have the clearances and read-ons that they need to investigate all of these incidents? And thirdly, when your staff cannot be read on, are your questions to those who are read on even being answered?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass that to Mr. Bray. So we're very conscious of the potential blue-on-blue issue or U.S. on U.S., and so we've established relationships with organizations and entities that are potentially flying or developing platforms for their own interests, if you will. And our goal is to continue, and we have a repeatable process. I think we've had that process for some time, to deconflict activities that we may have to ensure that we are not potentially reporting on something that may be a developmental platform or a U.S. operational platform that is performing either testing or performing a mission. So we will have that in place. We've already had those discussions with organizations and entities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their equities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their sources and methods while also getting at what we have here. We want to be able to deconflict those.
Absolutely. The UAP task force has had a process in place to work with other elements of the Department of Defense and other elements of the government to ensure that that there is an as simple a way as possible to deconflict those. And when we reference that in the report, I should say that we were simply accounting for the fact that there could possibly be one or two data points that had leaked through, but we were quite confident that was not the explanation.
How are you all liaisoning with Space Command? Specifically, how are you partnering with the parts of the U.S. Space Command responsible for space domain awareness? And how, if at all, are you partnering with the Space Force to analyze UAPs?
The UAP task force has a very good relationship with Space Force, as it does with the rest of the Department of Defense. We have pulled analysts in from Space Force to ensure that that we're availing ourselves of that expertise, as well as any other material they may have that would be helpful.
And Congressman, as you know, Space Force and Space Command, they have responsibility for space domain awareness. So what we've done, we coordinated with Space Force, we coordinated with their J2, and she is on board in terms of helping us plug into what they have and for us to have this interactive exchange of information and data. And we're doing that with all the services, not just with Space Force or Space Command.
Thank you, sir. Ranking member, any additional questions? Chairman Schiff. All right. With that, I want to thank you all for taking the time out. I also want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for participating in this very historical and important hearing. I think it's one of the few times we can demonstrate some degree of bipartisanship around UAPs and UFOs. So I love it. Appreciate it. Thank you. And we will see you all. We will recess this hearing for the moment and return in a closed session at noon.
All right. Well, don't go away if you're looking online. We're going to go deeper into this analysis here today. We have John Ramirez. So put on your microphone, John. And just for people who don't know you, just give us a little bit about your background here, because I think we're really honored to have you here today. So tell us who you are and where your background is, so we know, like when you comment,
you graduates.
Let me go ahead.
You're at a pinnacle.
Go ahead. Can you
of sorts?
Let me shut off this background here. Sorry.
With any luck, it won't be the last one.
Let me just close.
That's one
this.
metaphor, a pinnacle. Another.
Okay, John, and then I also want to show. And why don't you introduce John there?
Yes. Welcome, John. It's so great to have your expertise on this. And what an interesting day, right? The first time in 50 years that it's trickled down to the House and trickled down to us. And Here it is being broadcast on YouTube. And John has been really interested in this his whole life. And I'll let you tell what you want to explain about your background. But we're grateful to have you here to share your commentary.
Actually, can I just say one thing before we get there? Is that me and Deborah Giusti are putting on a big kind of a show, 5-part series about this. And let me just show people, it is called the Making Contact series. And let me just show people what we're going to do, because this is happening starting Thursday. And this is a 5-part series here that we are doing on what we just heard, the truth behind what we just heard. Can you see that, Zenka?
Yeah, we totally can see that.
So if you go to Making Contact series, this is an investigation into what we hope will be the truth. The first episode is with Nick Pope and JJ and Desiree Hurtak, and then we're going to have Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett on the June 2nd show. And then we're going to have a talk with Carolyn Corey and some of her technologies and covering UAPs. And then on June 16th, a show I'm really excited about is Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. And then we're on June 23rd, we're going to have an experiencers panel with Marina Sarin, Kamara Jones, Adam Apollo, Mary Rodwell. So that's Making Contact series. And I think we're going to go deeper, definitely, than we did today. So, yeah. So introduce John and his background, Zenka. So, yes.
Yeah. So John's retired. He worked in the signal processing unit of the CIA, and he's been, really understanding this from the inside. What department is not talking to what department, what research is being done, and he's also just really, been a supporter of citizens groups to really get down to a peaceful understanding of what's going on. So we're grateful to have him part of a community that's here talking about disclosure.
And what did we see today, John? And what didn't we see? And why didn't we see what we were all hoping to see?
Well, am I being heard?
Yes, you sound good. Yes.
What we saw was an internal process hearing, because I got that internally within the intelligence community, especially on the military side of the intelligence community, there's been a lot of efforts to suppress information from the rank and file military to report what they see. So that's the stigma. It's not the stigma of us, we the people, of reporting. That might be addressed later. But for this, it's processed within the Department of Defense, because they're setting up this, I guess they're calling it AIMSOG. So I'll use that, AIMSOG, to allow military people, especially on the intelligence side, those that are forward deployed who are seeing these objects, to report these objects without having their careers impacted. And so with this AIMSOG process, the Congress wanted to make sure that that process is starting so that reports will come in, because a lot of folks have seen these objects in the military, and just like civilian airline pilots before, they didn't want their careers to be impacted. So a lot of this was process oriented from Congress as part of their oversight responsibilities. What do you have in place, and is there a mechanism to get data in? That's what you saw. It was not about anything to do with disseminating information or disclosing information about UAPs. And so if we're expecting that, that might happen in the future. One thing I would point out is that this was the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and they are not bound by the NDAA. The NDAA oversight is the responsibility of the Armed Services Committees of both the House and the Senate. This is the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which they produced the IAA, the Intelligence Authorization Act, and they have a 90-day reporting requirement to Congress. So this is the first of the 90 days, and 90 days from hence, now we should get another hearing. I'm encouraged that there'll be more frequent hearings, and it might open up these other topics later.
But you were formerly with the CIA. What is your background particularly?
Yes, I was a CIA officer. I started in signals intelligence, which was why I was interested in when one of the congressmen asked about these radio frequency emanations coming from these craft that were detected. That piqued my interest. And also, I served in an organization called the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research, OSWR, which later became WINPAC, Weapons Intelligence, Non-Proliferation, and Arms Control. Now, those two are like one preceded the other. So OSWR was first in my career, and then WINPAC. These are the actual UFO study offices. When we study space objects or like true adversarial advanced aircraft capabilities, in the process of studying our day jobs, we started getting reporting from the field about UAPs and UFOs, including what was detected overseas. So we didn't look at what was inside the United States, which we're not allowed to. We were collecting data from China, from Russia, from Latin America, everywhere else in the world. Like, to your point, Alan, the entire world has been, reporting this. And so CIA looked at those kind of reports. And so I was in that office, just the sideline. Kit Green, who was in the Weird Desk, was in the predecessor, Office of Scientific Intelligence, and also he ended his career in the same office that I was in, the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research. So he had the Weird Desk associated with UFOs and all of that. So that was my background.
Wait, so the CIA knows that there are, I would say, craft from other worlds here, and why is it really national security, or is it protecting some other corporate interests or something that we're not hearing the truth here today?
I would say we know there are craft not associated with any terrestrial government. And I hesitate to say other worlds because a lot of us formers who are now coming out are stating that there are two types of hypotheses that we believe is happening. One is interdimensional, and the other is ultra-terrestrial. That is, there are beings here who were here before humans arrived, and they may have had some input into how we developed. And there are also the interdimensional aspect is there might be other elevated higher consciousness beings that don't need spacecraft to get here. And, we have channelers and we have experiencers who also contact these entities. And whether they call themselves or self-identify as Arcturians or Pleiadians or whatever, they're not flesh and blood like beings like the ultra-terrestrials.
So are we ever going to hear that truth? Are we ever, is anyone ever going to say, guess what? Because what you said, either they're interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, we're not talking about humans. And so are we ever going to get that from government, you think?
I don't know. That's the biggest question I have. Jim Semivan, myself, and Lou Elizondo, we kind of hint at, this is where we should be looking. And a lot of the remote viewers, that the military had also say that, there is a galactic federation. There is a world out there of these other beings who have some interest in us and how we develop as a species so that we don't destroy our planet. And because they're all ultra-terrestrials, we don't destroy them as well. So I don't know when that will happen, Alan, because that's a bridge that's hard to build from where we're at now to that. But those on the inside kind of know that, there's a program that kind of addresses that internally.
And I think it's actually, I think it will come out like, so we're already, because if you want to look at this stuff scientifically, we're actually developing body sensors and things like that that are alluding to these facts, So Joe Dispenza's actually just got super millions of dollars of funding, and they're showing how the blood changes during meditation. So, and our radio research that we've been doing with Jimmy Blanchett, and I mean, it's like, well, no one can explain how that's even possible. So I think our sensor technology is getting better, right? So it's not like, oh, I just had a telepathic thing. It's like, no, I'm getting a radio signal. And we're also, I mean, brain wearables are also picking up on, we understand what thoughts are coming into someone's brain now. Like we can say, oh, they're thinking about a couch, so all this stuff is evolving. And I think that, I mean, I know that we're disappointed about what happened there on TV, on TV today, but I think what's interesting is the fact that it seems like this nested doll, right? It's like, so we know that millions and millions and billions of dollars probably has been spent over this in the last, 70 years, right? And none of them are, it's all classified, black budgeted, and no one's talking to anybody. But this is already trickled down to the House, you know what I mean? Who's more, representatives of the people that are, asking these questions and starting to, and the fact that they destigmatize, just like you said, John, the reporting within the government, that destigmatization, we cannot say that that's not a big deal. This is a huge deal, right? Because do you imagine the amount of dinner conversations that are happening now that never happened before because this stuff is on, New York Times. So this is the kind of thing that invites this holistic picture. And it's important that us as citizens get our stuff together, get funded, get our data together, right? Because you cannot lie. And I mean, we're talking about statistics, like they're saying they have 400 reports, and they're still talking about threat, whatever, but nothing bad has happened. And if you look at the 200,000 reports, no one is being killed in like whatever, so this is the kind of thing we want: more data, we want more conversation. And so I'm excited that things are moving in this way. And we can't say that all government is bad. It's made up of people. And I, for one, would ask, in closing, I, for one, would ask that everyone watching today send Mr. Gallagher on Twitter a thank you for asking the question, like, hey, how is it that you're running this important, committee and you haven't even done research about what the, like the government has already been spending its money on. So these kinds of loops, these kinds of questions have to be asked. So Mr. Himes, Mr. Welts, Mr. LaHood, all those people showed up. There was no one, no one showed up, but some of them did, and they need to be thanked for doing that.
Right. No, good point, Zenka. But John, you also mentioned there's an internal committee that deals with this stuff that we're not hearing from. And one more question: do you think Elizondo will ever be called before Congress to talk about what he knows? So I'm curious what you're thinking.
I know for a fact that UFOs, UAPs, and higher consciousness especially are subjects of interest to CIA, especially higher consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's not because we want to make contact with Arcturians or Pleiadians, because if you look at CIA's mission, its principal mission is to recruit foreign intelligence officers who know something happening in their government, recruiting foreign government officials who know what is happening within their government, and to think about how their mind works. What causes a person to essentially become a traitor to his or her country? Mm-hmm. What is the thought processes? Also, as a countermeasure, how can we tell if being truthful? And so a lot of the technology for determining that has been developed and is still being developed. And so there's a higher consciousness aspect. But in doing so, we've also encountered instances where our remote viewers, who that program was created to, in the simplest term, project one's mind into an unknown area and report what they see. Mm-hmm. And so that was a spying mission, right? And in doing so, we also encountered like higher intelligences. We encountered, for lack of a better term, aliens, non-human entities.
Right.
The Galactic Federation, the fact that Mars was once habitable and had intelligent beings on it. So these other things came into the forefront as part of this remote viewing program. And when the Army had it, the Intelligence Security Command, they actually looked at, contacted Monroe at the Monroe Institute, and they started looking at that gateway process. And there's a wonderful paper that was written about that process, of gateway. And so at least the Army and the CIA had a great interest in this. So there is a program, and it's always ongoing, but it's not like the actual, it's not totally UAP oriented at all, but a big basket where UAPs play a significant part. Now, within that program, there's a subset of folks working on this issue. And so the biggest hint is Jim Semivan. If you listen behind what he says, the words he says, he stated that, oh yes, I'm working with a small program. I'm working with a small group at CIA, and that is that group. So I can address that. And your second question is about Lou. Lou knows these things, but he is not a whistleblower. He is a private consultant to the Department of Defense, and he has clearances through the Department of Defense. So in many ways, he knows what's going on behind the scenes, but he doesn't report to the department as much as he reports to an organizing committee. It's not this AOI MSG or AIMSOG. It's another committee, which, for lack of a better term, people call it MJ12. But forget about the title or the names, because that might not exist anymore. But there is a committee who informs policymakers, the elected policymakers, the appointed policymakers about what's going on. Now, these two gentlemen who are witnesses, they're part of that process. But I keep seeing these control rods being held tightly in place, where they don't want that chain reaction to happen all at once. And they're just like releasing selectively here and there a little bit. And so what we heard, like I said before, was like, at least, they're looking at the process of are we going to go forward with this in the future. But Lou knows a lot, and I agree, he should be a witness, as well as Chris Mellon, what they know, maybe Jim Semivan, what he knows, because these people still have clearances, are working within that program.
Well, Jim's had experiences. He's had contact experiences and stuff that he's been public about. But who's controlling this? Who's behind the scenes pulling the strings and saying, we're only going to say a little bit? There must be a massive structure in place. I mean, what do you think, John?
I don't think it's a massive structure. I really think it's a small committee. I call them the committee.
Oops.
I don't know who, but I mostly know what. And so the what part will be like people who are in academia, for example, select members of academia who might have been read onto certain aspects of the truth, as well as defense officials and intelligence officials in this program. And so their purpose is management. Now, what we saw in the NDAA, this AOI MSG, AIMSOG, is there's an executive committee for that, the AIMSOG Executive Committee. That is the public face of what's really going on behind the scenes. And so we're kind of like fed a little bit of the real truth, but it's like in bite-sized morsels. But what upsets me is that, well, I think most people can take the truth. We want the truth, and we can take it. We want to know the truth, and so what they're doing is mostly not for our benefit, but for internally, because there's a lot of resistance in the Pentagon going forward from this. There is a group that does not want any of this to come out. for whatever reasons. And some people cite personal religious beliefs. And they want to cast this as like demonology, that what we're seeing are entities that are demonic, satanic. And they actually firmly within themselves and their belief system hold that as truth. And they're in responsible positions. So they're the folks that Lou butts head against, that they're trying to like, don't talk about it. CIA side is a little more open. We're much more open. We're not as affected by that type of narrative. And so I wish CIA would be more forthcoming, but the only real spokesperson we have right now is Jim Simivan, and he is a former, not a current. But he knows what's going on, but he's limited to what he can say, and what he's doing is talking about his own personal experiences as a way of like shining a light into that dark corner that, it's all about higher consciousness. This is why they're here. And so it's all about them wanting to elevate our consciousness, trying to make our ascension happen.
So isn't that a direct contradiction to what we're hearing here, national security threat and all that garbage that's in the way? I mean, can you explain why they keep going back to national security threat when what you're saying is higher consciousness, the exact opposite? Yeah, go ahead.
It's because this subcommittee, it's the C3 subcommittee. And we have to take a step back. And first of all, it's the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, C3. And what does that mean? Counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and counterproliferation. So they're interested in like terrorist activities around the world, and those activities targeting the US. Counterintelligence is hunting for spies within our own government. That's counterintelligence. And counterproliferation is weapons of mass destruction. Those are like threats. And so this committee's focus is always on threats. It's the wrong subcommittee to go to. That is the exact wrong one.
If we're going to talk about higher intelligence in a subcommittee, who would we talk to? Could we call the CIA? Or what do you think the best strategy? Because what we're all talking about here is getting disclosure, the fact that we are not alone in the universe, that there's other beings, and that, like you said, and I believe it, they're here for our evolution of our consciousness. So how do we get there?
I don't know. If I could get there, I'll be there. But I just want to add on to what I said. I was hoping that the first committee would be the Senate Armed Services Committee, Emerging Threats and Capabilities. Now, the word threats is in that subcommittee's title. The soul is capabilities. Now, who sits on that is Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, who was a Navy fighter pilot who may have seen these objects himself. He also was a NASA astronaut who may have seen these objects out in space as a NASA astronaut, and who's also a member of that subcommittee. It's Senator Gillibrand, who was instrumental in at least getting that part of the legislation pushed through. So that I'm hoping that this isn't the only committee that's going to handle this for Congress. It should go into the Senate side, where it's chaired by Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, and the ranking member is Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. I was hoping that the intelligence, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, will also hold hearings. They don't have a subcommittee structure. It's the whole committee. And we've heard from Marco Rubio before. He's keenly interested in this. And also, we heard from Senator Gillibrand. She's keenly interested in this, and she is like questioning people who are being appointed positions. What do you think about UAPs? And she questioned an NSA appointee. I don't know anything. Well, she said, well, you better find out. You better know about UAPs. So these are baby steps, Alan, and I don't know how to get from where we're at in these baby steps to higher consciousness. I'm hoping that the James Webb Space Telescope will see something out there that the government may already know that's out there. It could be a portal, some opening up in the sky that these sensors can see. And then it say, oh my gosh, look at what's coming through then. These portals, we need to study that and let government science kind of cue government intelligence saying we need to look there.
Well, Carolyn Corey's movie A Tear in the Sky actually shows a portal. Have you seen that film?
I've seen the trailer for it, but I haven't actually seen the entire movie. But interesting enough, Avril Haines, who did say the word extraterrestrially, they may be coming to us extraterrestrially, also said something very, very interesting. She said, when asked about, what's out there, she said, well, we'll have to wait for Bill Nelson's people to let us know. And Bill Nelson being the NASA administrator, what she was actually saying is, let NASA science find what's out there, which we already know what's out there, but let them be the ones to discover what's out there. And then that, because it's science, it becomes more palatable. Now, having said that, I think civilian science has really taken a big leap forward. We kind of left government science behind because we're willing to go there. And the government scientists are not still hesitant to go there. So I applaud what Deborah has done with that movie, of the sensors that they used. You can imagine what the actual classified sensors can do. It's so much more, and they have the data. And that's what frustrated me about this hearing, is that they kind of pretended oh, I don't know, we still need to look at data. We're still collecting data. We didn't look at data from before, but they have it all.
Right. And you're right. When you say pretending, these guys we heard today they do know what we're trying to get to, what Zenka is working so hard at bringing to the people with, her light net and her they don't you think they know, and they're just stepping around the issue because they can't say the A word, the alien or ETs?
I think on the Department of Defense side, that's happening. Yeah. They just cannot go there yet. And they're just waiting for someone to cue them to go there, so then they can have a reason to do so that isn't revealing, oh, we knew this all along. That's why I say I think NASA will lead the way, and they'll find something out there through NASA's research and their sensors that will then cue the intelligence community to go where they already knew where to go.
Right. I think that there was some remorse in the opening comments of the secrecy that's been there. So it doesn't mean that the people that are there today agree that we should have been so secretive about the information. One of the things I wonder about is we're in a global world. So why aren't other governments revealing what they know? What's going on here? And again, before you answer that, John, I just want to say, when we support these people, the Mark Kellys, the Mark Warners, the Marco Rubios, with emails, with calls, with tweets, that's telling them, keep going. We're supporting you in what you're doing, because there's obviously heroes inside the government, and we need to support them in the work that they're doing. And so, but yeah, back to my question is why aren't other governments talking about this?
I don't know, but I do know this. We do share information, government to government, even our adversaries, what most people think are adversaries. Information sharing is happening about this. And especially with our allies, a lot of information sharing is happening. But I don't know why, they're not stating publicly, and I don't think it was a national security concern to say, yeah, we're talking to the Russians and the Chinese, and we're talking to nations in Latin America and the Middle East and Europe, that all of this data is coming in. Why is that such a secret to not at least reveal the fact of, if they don't want to reveal the substance? They didn't even really allude to that. They kind of danced around it, and I don't know why they would do that.
So what's occurring to me is like, maybe they think that the people can't handle it, that the people are going to be super freaked out and like panicked and like, oh my God, and it's going to cause some sort of pandemonium. Like, wouldn't that be hilarious? Because that's not what I think would happen. I think people already know about this. They already know, like, it's like they're already 20 steps ahead of the government, party line or whatever. But I mean, do you think that's what could be stopping them?
No, it's not the individual people, like we the people. It's the government. The U.S. government is worried about institutions. They're worried about the impact that a full dissemination or disclosure would have on the mundane things of how this country runs. It's the stock market, it's religious belief systems, it's social economic, it's education, it's all of that. It's institutionally, that's what they want to preserve. And just making little forays into that so that these institutions are composed of us, people, and that if enough people are convinced and are able to handle the truth and they're in these institutions, then that would elevate the institutions as well. And so they're mindful of that impact as well. They just don't want to throw everything up in the air, which is they're still going with the Brookings Institute paper commissioned by the Eisenhower administration and delivered to the Kennedy administration about disclosing life out in space. And that Brookings Institute paper is still like the operating paper that the government uses, saying, oh, we can't do this yet. But
yeah, that's why, I mean, so much pressure like that's built up. And I think it's like, that's why we got to celebrate every single ratchet that's opening this jar, it's like, okay, so we just passed one thing today. They're talking about it on live congressional here, then the next thing is what you said, the Senate hearing. And the next thing is the, Newsweek. And the next thing is the whatever, it's like, we've got to march this all forward more quickly because the peace of our world depends on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also want to go back to a little bit of what you said, higher consciousness, John, that's what you feel the message of these ETs are. How do you know that? And how can we get that to be said publicly?
Well, I know that personally. And and then in communicating with like Jim Semivan, my CIA colleague.
Right.
He knows that as well. And then, communicating with my colleagues that I worked with when I was employed by CIA, they know that as well. And like I've said before, there are a lot of people who are experiencers within government, and they need a place to share those experiences. Now, one thing I was happy about is some of the congressmen did talk about the ability to share within government. And there is within government, and Chris Mellon stated it. So the ODNI has set up a chat room and that's still top secret SCI, but it allows these people in the intelligence community, especially civilian side intelligence community, to share their experiences, to share their beliefs of what happened or what is happening, and maybe share information that might be classified. So the ODNI does have this chat room database. However, the Air Force has been calling through this database and finding Air Force people, civilians, or even military, and intimidating them. And that's completely wrong.
Well, it's against the law, even according to the what Congress put out about stigma and
right.
How does the Air Force get away with doing that when they're breaking the law?
That's one of the questions Chris Mellon queued up in a piece that he wrote. Here's what I would ask if I was a congressman. He queued up a lot of questions that he wants answers to, because he knows the answers, but he wanted the questions to be spoken out loud.
Right.
And so they touched on some of it, but not all of it, and probably not in this very first hearing. But yeah, what they're doing within the Air Force, they're protecting programs. So why is the Navy more forthcoming than the Air Force? And I've always said the Navy has the data But if you go back to Roswell, what was retrieved went to the Army Air Force before it became the Air Force. And they've had this material since then and may have exploited it to the point where they now incorporated some of that technology into craft that they have built, and they want to protect that program. And so opening up all of UAPs to the general public might then expose some of the things we see or have been seen might be their craft and not craft of non-human origin. And they want to protect their craft. And I happen to know that there is such craft, and see people call it TR3B, manta, black manta. But I tell people, step away from all of these labels that you hear in social media, you hear on UFO Twitter. Step away from the label and ask, does the Air Force have an advanced aerospace vehicle based on advanced technology that may have been recovered? Right. Simple question. I'm not saying what it's called. And if they were truthful, they will say, yes, we do. But if you ask the Air Force, do you have a TR-3B black manta? They'll say, no, we don't have that, because that's not what it's called. You ask the government, is there a Majestic 12? They'll say, no, we don't have that, because that's not what it's called. The government literally will answer your question and give you a literal answer based on your question. And if there's something that they can't talk about, they just say, I can't talk about it, which is like a yes. When they go to closed session, which means classified session, and they say, I can't talk about it, we have to go to closed session. It's basically just say yes. That's basically a yes from them, that they can't disclose it publicly, but yes, but we can talk about it, offline, in that closed session. So. Right.
Well, Zenka, I have a lot more questions for John. How much time do you have, John? Because
whenever you shut down, I'll shut down.
I could talk to you all day, because what you're saying is so valuable for what people really want to hear. So, I mean, my question is, it seems if you're saying there's higher intelligence that is wanting us to wake up, and there's forces inside the government that doesn't want that to happen, it seems like we are in a battle of sorts between, I don't want to say light and dark, but whatever, there's some kind of internal, even intellectual battle going on within the public that is keeping us dumb and stupid and ignorant. And what do we need to do to gain the force and the energy to come forward with this? Well, I'll just show you what we're doing. Me and Deborah Giusti, we're putting on this 5-part series here that's coming up. You can go to Making Contact series. We're going to be talking to Nick Pope and JJ and Desiree Hurtak this Thursday. And then I'm talking to Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett on June 2nd. And Carolyn Corey, June 9th, and Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe on June 16th. So it's the first session's free, and I just say this is another way of going in. But also, what you're saying here, John, is what is the real battle? This is a battle for the soul of humanity, and how do we change it? I mean, it's so frustrating to hear all these bureaucratic, I don't know, talking points that don't ever get to the truth.
Right. And so that's the value of having legislation, both in the NDAA and the IAA. Because there are these two pieces of signed legislation, now we, the voters, when there is a candidate for office, let's say a congressperson wants to be reelected, or a new candidate wants to run for office, then the press and we, the people, can ask them, oh, by the way, there's this NDAA and there's a UAP section in that. What do you feel about that? That's no longer considered crazy. Mm-hmm. You can legitimately ask that. The press, the media can ask that question of these candidates, of these incumbents, what do you feel about this? And at least start that discussion. That's the very first step of trying to get people of that mind into office so we can have that greater discussion coming forward. That's one way of doing it. And another way is because the stigma is removed from the military and from the intelligence community, then the stigma should also be removed from the corporate world, the world that many people work in, you know, where they don't want to talk about this in the workplace because they're fear for, you know, what people might think of them. But if the conversation happens on that level, all of a sudden that now we can start talking about what we're seeing and also what we're experiencing and what we're feeling.
Right.
And so all these steps need to happen. And so, yeah, I was disappointed with today, but I didn't expect, you know, everything to come out.
But we do have Andre Carson in there. We have Tim Burchett. We have that guy Gallagher. There are people in office. But, you know, and then Zenka, yeah, I know you want to ask. I just want to say corporate, when you mentioned corporate, it seems like corporate interests are in control because obviously what's ever out there is not filling up their gas tank to get here. And that's a threat to corporate monopolies. So, yeah, that's the problem. Zenka, yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Alan, because if everything boils down to economics and at a core level, when you talk about politics and things and decision making like that, that's some people are saying that's why they haven't been more forthcoming about this information, because free energy is baked into the whole story, you know, the whole technology. So that's an interesting way to think about it. Wow. I would also encourage us to realize that the government is a microcosm of our society, okay, at a global level and a country level. So if there's people in the government that, as you say, don't want to talk about enlightenment and channeling because they think it's negative entities, that's a part of us that's not ready to get curious. And that's the thing. It's all of these thoughts and beliefs and systems take time to die and rebirth. And I think one of the flags that we can carry as a movement is this idea that, hey, let's get curious about this. We don't have all the answers. But if you're saying, no, I can't listen to that because it's evil or this or that, then you're not being curious. And I would also encourage, you know, the mission of LightNet is to really get people to have these first experiences, because when you see that UFO, you cannot deny that you saw that UFO, and it suddenly becomes a totally different discussion for you. So if you, and we know that people who've seen UFOs or done channeling or done meditations or remembered their dreams are good at helping other people do it. So that's what we're doing at lightnet.org is on Thursday, we're launching these small groups of 8 to lovingly bring. So if you know, it doesn't even have to be through our platform. You know, if you know how to see a UFO, show someone else how to do it. You know, if you know how to remember your dreams, encourage someone to do it. We dream a third of the time, and scientists are saying that a lot of these answers to our questions are coming through dreams, right? So if this is interdimensional, if this is consciousness, then when your waking mind, the one that's behind is asleep, you're a little bit freer to start to understand these things in a different way. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we really need to think of this as kind of like a chessboard, and the government is us and we're the society, and it's one conversation at a time. It's one experience at a time. And thanks to Alan for putting on the Making Contact series. Thanks for, you know, Dwayne, I'll share my screen. You know, Dwayne is going to be releasing, we're talking about different footage that we want to see. So on the Blind Frog Ranch, which is close to the Skinwalker Ranch, they're having a massive UFO disclosure symposium because they've got amazing footage that's never been seen before. And they've actually gotten mainstream press to come and to cover the event. So again, this is all one thing is dominoing into the other. And, you know, they've got Avi Loeb coming, you know, so we've got, you know, Harvard professors jumping into the mix, which is totally amazing. So so again, also, we'd love to have you up in Contact 2022. John, Alan and I are going to be speaking. It's up here in Sedona. It's not going to be done live. But yeah, this stuff is happening. And I see Deborah here. I don't know, Deborah, if you want to talk about what you're working on, but these things are so important, that what we're doing as citizens to keep the word out and to keep the knowledge going. And I think we really need centralized systems to unite all these UFO organizations so that we can be a more organized front of
people's movement. Yes.
Invitation into experience, and also show the data, the statistics, which is what they seem to want. Hey, Deborah.
People to Deborah Giusti, who is co-producing the Making Contact series and has been a driving force in getting this public. Deborah, you want to just jump in about, and wait, unmute. We don't want to miss anything.
I think this is amazing. And John, that was incredible, explanation of all that's going on and way beyond and all what we need to know right now. And I think the biggest thing is that we're all coming together. So many people around the world are shouting out now, and that's going to be heard. That can't be denied. And it's not just the people that know about the UFOs. It's everybody is waking up on all levels, and not just to UFO consciousness, but to their own personal evolution, to everything that's going on the planet, to everything that's going on behind the scenes that is now coming up to be revealed, healed, exposed, and transformed. So this is a part of everything that's moving forward now. And I'm so happy to be working with Alan. I've known him for many, many years. I mean, we've all been connected, but now we're in deeper and deeper collaboration, directed by Spirit, to come out and do what we came here to do. And this time right now it's getting all the information out, like all of us are compelled to do these online programs and get the information out. So I think it's really beautiful. And even though it wasn't the big wow, there was a lot of good questions that were asked. And there's people there, you could tell they knew what was going on. The other people knew it was going on. You could see all that behind the scenes, So even though it's not on the surface right now, it's percolating up, and it can't be denied on all levels. So it's all part of the transformation, the shift that's happening now that we all came from at this point.
Well, thank you, Deborah. It's great working with you because you're so enthusiastic, and we are on a threshold of something. This at least was an opening of a door. And John, thank you for coming forward, with your background and your awareness. We need to hear from more people like you, and brave enough to just say the truth. And one thing I was interested in what you did say is that there's a private chat inside government for experiences that come forward. Are you a part of that? And can you share? You're not. Okay.
No, I can't share. It was set up by Abraham.
Right.
So the DNI set it up, and it is classified top secret SCI. I no longer hold clearances. And so you have to access it through a government computer in a SCIF. So obviously I won't be able to access it, but the fact that such a thing exists, I've known about. And I'm happy for Chris Mellon to actually reveal the fact that there is this chat room. It's basically you classified a national classified database for intelligence officers. It's a classified UFO Twitter. Basically, it's what it is. But people are able to then have a venue to share their experiences within the government. So there is not stigma. So within the government, that's very helpful. And maybe then, and I'm encouraging people that I know who have retired and who are experiences to come forward as well. Say there's a way to do it. And there's a way, that you can put things in a slideshow presentation or give a talk. Just run it through. CIA has never, ever redacted anything. And I've had like 3 versions of what I've been saying that CIA has approved.
Wow. And
so it's not like they're trying to suppress me from saying anything. Jim Semivan can talk about what he talks about because he went through the same process. James Lukatsky, who wrote the Skinwalkers of the Pentagon book, went through that process. And I'm sure Lou Elizondo, who is writing a book as we speak, is going to go through that process. And I think there are elements within the intelligence community that want this to happen in a way that that protects sources and methods. That's a legitimate concern.
What can you explain what that actually means? That people use that, but I don't know what that means. Sources and methods.
Sure, a source is where and what we get information from. It could be a person or a technical device. That's a source. And we say the source is highly perishable, especially if it is a human source, a person. Because if a country briefs like a handful of people on a secret program that country's doing, and that information is released, then that country's counterintelligence can go down the list and say, okay, who do we brief? And they can go right down this list and interrogate them in a not very nice way. And it could result in their death. So we need to protect sources of information. We need to protect the fact that we may have a device, technical device that's collecting information behind the scenes in a foreign government. Because if that's discovered, then we lose that source of information. So that's protecting source. The method is the technical means how we extract that information from a very remote site. So if it's a gadget and country X, and the country X is very authoritarian, and it's what we call a hard target, hard to get into, hard to penetrate. We may have an agent who, for whatever motivation, will agree to place that device in that sensitive area.
Right.
So that's a source who we work with, and that device is a source from which we gather information. And how that source talks back to us, how do we retrieve that information that's being collected by that gadget? That's the method. Once that method is exposed, we can never use it again.
Right.
So that's sources and methods. So it's not just UAP related. It's I think one of the witnesses said truthfully that we use these sources and methods to collect just intelligence data worldwide, and so we can't reveal how what sensors may have picked up more than the disappointing handheld videos that we saw out of a cockpit. There's instrumented data that we have that they can't reveal, because that same instrumented data that might be flying on a satellite or flying on an airplane, looking into a country, that's the same way that we collect information.
Right.
So they can't compromise that.
So how much do you think Avril Haines knows, head of the intelligence, DNI, government agency, I guess, and how much, and what do you, and it's a two-part question, is like, are there people behind the scenes, whatever, subcommittee, saying, should we tell them? No, we shouldn't. I mean, I know there's the religious, kind of impingement, but is that conversation happening? You think, let's tell them, let's not tell them. It's just frustrating how much people know and want to say. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
To address your first question, Avril Haines knows everything.
Wow.
There is a myth that for certain things the president is not told. That is a myth. When the president asks a question he wants answered, or she wants answered, the federal executive branch of government will answer that question. And so the question needs to be asked, and the government will answer that question. The executive branch of government will. She knows a lot more than what she says. In fact, she hinted when she said the word extraterrestrial, right there is a hint that she knows something, that it's not adversarial.
Well, it could be adversarial if it's extraterrestrial. It could be an adversary.
It could be, but it could be adversarial, but not terrestrially adversarial. It's not China or Russia.
Right.
I've made that statement plain, as Jim Semivan, who actually knows the answer.
Yeah.
I know from a perspective of having been retired for 13 years, that what we saw in the orbs didn't come from Russia and China. We eliminated that right away. It's not terrestrial technology. Deborah Haynes knows, and the clue of what she knows is to go back to the public statements of her predecessors, the former directors of CIA, and also the former DNI that preceded her, saying that, oh yeah, we have all kinds of satellite data, we have all kinds of collected data. If you go back to Helen Carter, who was the first director of Central Intelligence, he gave an interview to the New York Times in February of 1960, and he called the Air Force to task, saying the Air Force is hiding all of this information about the true origins of UFOs. And it's high time that Congress holds hearings about the true origins of UFOs. There's no reason for this secrecy. And Helen Carter was the DCI when Roswell happened. He ran the Central Intelligence Group, which became the Central Intelligence Agency. He was the top official in the US government when Roswell happened, and he knows, and even back in 1960, he made those statements. And so you can imagine then that Deborah Haynes, the current DNI, would have that information, would have that knowledge.
Right.
And the second part of your question was, about factions that are going on.
Yes.
My belief is that the faction that wants to suppress this information for whatever reason, whether it's like mundane, like economic reasons, socioeconomic, or geopolitical reasons, or if it's a personally held religious belief, I can almost feel them. Like their fingernails are just scraping down the wall. They're losing traction. They're going to lose. They know it. And they're scrambling now. So what do we do now? Oh my gosh, Congress just held a hearing on this. And they know that they're basically, they're going to be superseded and left behind. And I think in the future, as more of these hearings come forward, that will go away. I mean, they're going to disappear. So I have that hope.
Wow.
Within the government, I was just going to ask John, within the government, how compartmentalized is the intelligence that's being gathered? Who has access to what? What did they allude to today that made us think that there's any interdepartmental sharing? Is there a central database or not? How does it work exactly? Or is it just levels of clearances? Or is everything siloed between the different departments?
Right. Silos are a good way to think of them. We call them stovepipes in the government. They're stovepipes of information. First of all, I want to dispel the myth that there's really nothing above top secret. Top secret is the highest classification in the US government. But having said that, to your point, Zenka, there are stovepipes, and some of these pipes are really, really big. And so a lot of people are briefed into that type of information under that compartment. But something like UFOs and UAPs might be like a soda straw compared to a giant chimney. So it's a soda straw. And because it's so narrow, these people have top secret SCI, which means that you're eligible to be read in if it's part of your job to deal with the subject matter. You have top secret SCI, you've been vetted, you took a polygraph, we know that you're not spying against the US, you're completely trustworthy. Oh, it's your job to look into this. We can read you into that really narrow compartment. And there might be like hundreds of people, it might be a few thousand, but it might sound like a lot of people, but if you look at the entire federal government and the entire military, it is really a soda straw. And so it is managed. And certain programs are SAPs, special access programs. They're military. So SAPs tend to be military, and they tend to protect military hardware, military plans and intentions in SAPs. CIA has CAPS, they mention CAPS. There are controlled access programs. And so it's just different terminology, but it's the same thing. It's like really narrowly restricted. And CAPS and the CIA tend to be broader collection programs, working with technology or working with governments that we don't acknowledge. And so those are like controlled access programs, and they're literally have something called a bigot list. It's a bad choice of words, but it's very stark in the sense that it really isolates people by name of who can have that information. Now, I've revealed before, and CIA doesn't mind me revealing, I was in a cab dealing with the People's Republic of China, where CIA had a relationship, intelligence sharing with the People's Republic of China during a time when the Chinese were supposed to be our adversaries. But behind the scenes, we were working with them because we're going after a target of mutual benefit to both countries, the US and China. That's the Soviet Union. So we did establish collection facilities in China with our partner NSA and staffed them with CIA officers working with my counterparts in the Chinese intelligence. So here we are at one level competing as adversaries and another level cooperating as friends. And so that might be protected in the cap. And there was a bigot list, and I had access to that bigot. I was the control officer very briefly for this bigot list, and inside was like names of presidents going back to Jimmy Carter, their birthdays and social security number and birthplace. So I had the social security numbers of presidents. And there's me right there, you know, John Ramirez. I had my birthplace, Yokohama, Japan, had my social security number and date of birth, July 14th, 1953. So I was in that list, and there were only like several hundred people in that list. And to the Davis-Wilson memo, you know who I didn't see on that list? A lot of DIA people. They weren't on that list because it's a CIA program, not a DIA program. So here's another example of having a soda straw into CIA, having a very highly compartmented program at the time, and eliminating other parts of the government. Now, projecting it to the UAP, it's probably the same thing, where there's a soda straw of information in which a lot of the real UFO UAP data goes into, including, you know, whether we've had contact with these entities. That might be in there. If other governments have had contact, that might be in there. What do we know about them? Where do they come from? You know, that might be in there. And what are we doing to address this? That might be in there. And it might be a very limited number of people. So even within the DNI or CIA or any of these intelligence agencies, not everyone is read into that program. So it's so narrow. And so there are people in there that might be like managing the narrative out there. The people I allude to as losing control, they might be in there as well as people who want to be more forthcoming about this information.
So you talked about this idea, you know, I just watched that movie at Alan's request of the men watching goats, and it talked about the New Earth Army, you know, brigade within the US Army that was looking at the more psychological, more enlightenment terms. So my question is there, who's doing that research now? You know, like the Monroe Institute, is there nothing in the US government? Obviously there would be. And where is that? And also, where would you place the flip side of all this? Like if we all know that they're not a threat, then what governmental agency is should be moving forward with more diplomacy or cultural, you know, study or whatever? Yeah. So the first question is, does the you know, the astral travel and channeling and all that stuff exist as a research within the government? And if so, where? And where would you place this kind of research going forward?
That's right. There was a concept of a New Earth Battalion and having monk warriors. The person I know would be Colonel John Alexander. He is like a monk warrior in that sense. He is a person who will talk about higher consciousness, and he has briefed the Association of Former Intelligence Officers about his experiences with the UFOs and what he's discovered within the intelligence community to these former retired, you know, intelligence officers in a, I think it was a luncheon speech he gave in 2013. And I'm trying to work with I try to get like some semblance of that and trying to contact John Alexander about that. So it did exist. Having said that, on the CIA side, it was all about this higher consciousness about developing human potential. And of course, the Pentagon says super soldiers, but what we wanted were super spies, not super soldiers. We wanted people who could use these either acquired or given gifts to work with the intelligence community, to do the intelligence community mission. And the remote viewing program still exists, but it's been all outsourced outward to private entities. And so we have former remote viewers who set up programs or are associated with other institutes to continue this, and then the government can then tap into.
Like who?
For example, Joe McMoneagle, Lynn Buchanan. I think and I met him at Laughlin, Nevada. Unfortunately, I can't think of his name right now. His first name is Paul Smith. Paul Smith, he's up in Utah. These are military remote viewers who are working this issue, and it might be others, I don't know. But they're out there working for Monroe Institute, the Farsight Institute. There's the Universal Light Center in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Paul Smith's organization as well. They're doing this on behalf of the government. And I don't know if the government still has a remote viewing program within government that's funded by taxpayer dollars. But I do know the remote viewing activity is still ongoing. And that was your first question. And you asked several more.
And the second one is so if I mean, I was sort of flabbergasted by how military sounding this is. Like, if, it's like, well, we all know that aliens are among us, and this is much more dimensional and complex than we ever realized. But if, our instinct, is like, oh, let's figure out if they're a threat. It's like, well, let's figure out if we should, let's welcome them. Right. You know what I mean? So who would be on that committee? What departmental, what departmental group would be on that?
Well, that's an easy answer, because diplomacy in the United States government happens within the Department of State. And they're responsible for that. Also, I would say United Nations, the Outer Space Office in the United Nations are responsible for that. So it would be State Department and the UN. Diplomacy is done in these organizations.
But is that happening? Is anyone read into like, hey, there might be this State Department or diplomacy act with these beings? Has that happened at all?
I'm not sure about State Department, but it would be in the Intelligence and Research Bureau of the State Department. It still have, we call it IN for intelligence, R for research. There was a bureau like that, and I haven't seen a State Department organization chart that would still have that in there. I don't know. But I'll also say that going towards citizen science, there's also citizen diplomacy. There's efforts to establish an ET embassy, some way of establishing a place where these other higher consciousness beings or other, I call them ultra-terrestrials who are already here, to come and make some kind of contact, welcome them to make contact in a way that's not dealing with the government in a sense. So I have high hopes for this ET embassy program, this concept of having a facility where this can happen.
By the way, for those watching, it's the Alliance for the number 4 ET.org. And they're going to be doing a conference this year to talk about their efforts. They've raised multi-millions of dollars to build an embassy, and they've gotten a lot of traction within the UN and within countries who want to host the embassy. So it's Alliance for ET.org. And they're very, they're decades into this and very close to getting the Vienna Convention, discussed and ratified. So that's, we talk about, I used to study influencers, and I used to track their Facebooks and their YouTubes and to see what was happening. And the people that were spiking the most are the rock stars, right?
Yeah.
So here we are, like, all, panties up in a bunch about what the government said or not said or whatever, but really this is a cultural movement that has to be pushed by the artists, by the musicians, by the filmmakers, because I would track some of these important thinkers and researchers, and then the musicians would have millions and millions of followers. You know what I mean? So really, this is what we're all working toward. It's all a cultural mimetic, piece by piece shift. And the embassy project is an idea that we can all get behind. That's like, you just want to talk about it. You want to look at the UFO pool and you want to see how the architecture is so amazing. So the more we can do to rally behind their conference and their work and this idea, and just literally writing to the United Nations, writing to your local government saying, I want the embassy to be here. This is what it takes. It takes us not just watching, it takes us doing. And it's in conversations, it's in songs, it's in writing. It's like I said, I would encourage everyone to tweet to these congressmen who showed up, got there, asked questions, Mr. LaHood, Mr. Welch, Mr. Himes, Mr. Gallagher, and tell them, thanks for showing up. Thanks for pushing this forward.
Right. Hey, yeah, no, that's great. You're absolutely right. This is a cultural phenomenon, and that's why it's up to us to really present to the public what we feel the inside information is, what our experiences are. And that's why I'll be interviewing Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett and Nick Pope. Maybe we can have you come on, John, or maybe I could do a separate show with you and Jim Semivan, who I had about an hour and a half conversation with. He was very open, very forthcoming, and be good to go into the CIA and bring out this. This is knowledge for the Earth, for our evolution. So, this is my upcoming conference. Thanks, Zenka. This is making contact. It's starting this Thursday with Nick Pope and JJ Hertog and Desiree Hertog, and then we go to Danny Sheehan. I don't want to just make this a commercial, because what I think is we need to keep these discussions going on many, many levels. So yeah, this is
the embassy, by the way. They're doing a conference in 142 days.
Yes, I'll be.
And
yes,
it's amazing what they're doing. It's totally great.
Oh, it's there. I'm speaking there. Are you speaking there, Zenka? Preston Dennett? These are some of the.
It's going to be a one-day conference, so they're going to have, they're not going to have, too many speakers, but they're going to reveal, they're doing like virtual reality of how the embassy is going to look and things like that, so it's
okay. But I think we need to talk about what John is saying. This is about higher consciousness. This is about evolution, and it's governments, I feel, are in the way of this evolutionary process because they want to keep a cap on it. It's like the church saying, no, the earth is the center of the universe and that's all there is to it. But
to be fair, this is a mind trip. This is like a backflip.
What is a backflip?
To realize that we're living in a multi-dimensional reality gated by frequencies that our third eye and telepathy can say. I mean, it's like, this is a lot.
This is huge. Wow. Actually, I'm going to send you a copy of my book or a PDF, John, okay? Because my Making Contact book goes into ultra-terrestrials, these higher dimensional presences that are trying to lift us up out of our ignorance, and we are being kept ignorant.
When did you come to that conclusion, John? That we were living in a multi-dimensional reality that was like,
let me put in a plug, Zenka, I'll put in a plug for Exo Metaverse. As you know, I was a guest on Exo Metaverse with Nadi Hana. And I related a lot of my experiences, and I've talked about experiences, but I'm a lifelong experiencer. And
wow.
So, it came to me naturally, starting at age 4 and going forward. People who see my interviews, particularly more of the higher consciousness interviews and not the nuts and bolts UFO, UAP craft interviews that most of the interviewers want. But I did a few for Quantum Witch Cafe, witch spelled with a Y instead of an I, and Savita Starseed. And they're on YouTube, where I talked about the higher consciousness aspect and more of my experiences. Alan, I was in, this was before anyone knew who I was. I was in the Making Contact Convergence last year, and I got your book. I thank you very much. I did get it as a VIP participant.
Oh, did you read it? Did you have a chance to read some of it?
I've got so many books to read right now. Okay. I'm working on, I'm a very slow reader, so I am working on it.
Well, when you get a chance, it's chapters by different experts in the field. So chapter 3 is by J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak, who talk about the ultra-terrestrials. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should do a program with you and Jim Semivan about the CIA and experiencers within the CIA. Would that be something you'd be wanting to participate in?
Sure, if Jim is willing to go on. And in fact, as you know, George Knapp had Jim and I on to host, but George had us separate, and Jim and I wanted George to have us together.
Yeah, I will put you together.
Yeah,
because Jim, I couldn't believe what a great guy Jim was. How open and curious, and you know, both of you guys are seeing the bigger picture here that the government somehow is not seeing. Do you feel like this is the end of this disconnected rulership that's in place, because it's not letting us? It feels like, you know, what the revolution was, that what was it, representation without you know, not representing the will of the people. These are, government is working for us. We the people, and they are now preventing people from understanding their own democratic rights for freedom. And so, not to put you in conspiracy, but do you think it's the end, or could mark the end of government as we know it? And I'm not saying this, I think we do need governing policies, but the way it's gotten so complex and so segmented, it seems like a dinosaur. What do you think?
Yeah, I talked about that in my interview, going through the history of why it's secret. In 1947, in January 1946, Truman, after he was briefed on a lot of the technology that the Germans held, decided to create the Central Intelligence Group and the National Intelligence Authority, and that was in operation at the time of Roswell. And when Roswell happened, before Roswell happened, it was already thought that they would make the CIG into a CIA and create the what became the Department of Defense. In 1948, roughly a year after Roswell, there was a bill passed through Congress that allowed corporate world, the defense contractors, to become defense contractors. It enabled black project programs. It enabled sole source contracting, non-competitive practices amongst these contractors, and enabled black projects and budgets. And that started the national security military industrial complex. So previously, when Truman created the Central Intelligence Group under the National Intelligence Authority, that was the first time we had a true national security state. And then the military industrial complex occurred in 1948 when this law was passed that allowed these carve-outs. The law is very interesting. It says, you know, that competition between among contractors the government will do business with should be open, except for, and the except for is where the everything in the UFO UAP is happening, where all the exploitation of technology and so forth. It allows these black budgets to occur legally, and there have been other laws since then most notably Executive Order 13-526, signed by President Obama, which further strengthened the ability to carve out these unacknowledged SAPs. So Obama allowed unacknowledged SAPs to occur.
Why would he do that?
I don't know. I do not know. So, executive order, that's not law. That's not US law, but it's based on US law. And so people say, well, these things are unconstitutional, illegal. I counter with, no, they're not illegal because Congress passed laws. Our representative passed these laws signed by the president. And so in that sense, it's legal. The question to ask is it constitutional? And no one's ever challenged the constitutionality of some of these more draconian legislation that occurred that enables that faction to keep control. No one's gone before and said, I'm going to go through the federal courts and end up at the Supreme Court because I think this is unconstitutional. That hasn't happened yet. And Danny Sheehan, being a lawyer, he would probably be a better person to answer why that hasn't occurred, or why hasn't anyone challenged these carve-outs, these unacknowledged SAPs from being.
I'm going to ask Danny that question, and maybe you could join.
Yeah, if you reference Executive Order 13-526 and the carve-outs allowed in that executive order, that might be an interesting answer.
Well, maybe you could join us for part of that program. That's the June 2nd program on the Making Contact series. But I will reach out. Zenka, did you have something else to say? Because
No. I mean, I think the issue is, it's like, so we need to get the information first shared within government so that these lower, less, high security people are getting some of these crumbs, these breadcrumbs, right? And that there's not this highly curated list of only 200 people or less in these tiny, straws, you know what I mean? So the more that all can open up, and then the more that the pop culture and the demand is here, the faster this is all going to go.
Yeah. And one more question, and thank you for your time, John. And you've been such a valuable resource because we just, I'm not familiar with government. I try to avoid it. And, you're inside, you can dissect it in a much clearer way and help people understand what we just saw and what we didn't just see, so. But how big is the experiencer community within government? I mean, of course, there's no way of knowing, but what's your guess? Like, how many people in Congress and government and military, percentage-wise, you think are directly connected to this phenomena?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that I've spoken personally with many colleagues in other agencies and within CIA. And when I get to know them, we talk about our hobbies and whatnot, and I mentioned that, I go to UFO conferences, and then that opens up that avenue of discussion. And in fact, I think it was Mr. Moultrie who talked about, oh yeah, I went to these conferences.
Sci-fi conference.
So, that's an indication that here was this gentleman. I know where he worked at CIA, and I know what his professional job was at CIA.
Moultrie, you knew Moultrie at CIA?
I don't know him personally, but I knew what he did.
Oh, he was CIA Moultrie.
He was originally, I think he was naval intelligence, then went into CIA in the information operations and information warfare areas of CIA. And I can reveal that it was something called the Clandestine Information Technology Office and the Information Operations Center. And then from there, he went to NSA in the SIGINT Directorate, and then he ran the National Security Operations Center, the NSA Watch Office, if you will. That for 24/7, every second of every day, they're taking in all of this SIGINT data from all of these sensors that the U.S. government has, and then, parsing it out. And that's his background before he was appointed to be the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. And so even at that level, he says, I've been to UFO